grappling serious problems. Another one would be the greening of America. The ones this year were, number 1, Garfield takes a vacation. Number 2, what color is your parachute? Number 3, the preppy guide to campus survival. The shift has been enormous in those few years. Now, let's look first of all at what it means. What does a man or woman of God look like? Let's have a quick look. In Luke chapter 3, verses 1 to 3, I actually had a simple language New Testament, and I want to read it from that because people say, boy, that was profound. By that they mean I couldn't understand the word he was talking about. So what we want to do is read this from a New Testament that has less than 300-word basic vocabulary, all right? Here's the way it goes. In your King Jimmy version or advanced reverse stilted visions or international versions coming to you from around the world, you will probably have different things. But it goes something like, in the 15th year of the reign of this. Here's the way this simple language puts it. Tiberius Caesar had been leader for 15 years. Pontius Pilate was the leader of the country of Judea. Herod was the leader of Galilee. His brother Philip was the leader of the countries of Iturea and Trachonitis. It sounds like a disease of some sort. Lysanias was leader of the country of Abilene, which you thought was in Texas, but is actually here. Annas and Caiaphas were the head religious leaders. And the word of the Lord came to John the Baptist. Isn't that funny? Listen to need. This guy was the head of this, and he was the head of that. And the word of the Lord came to somebody who was the head of nothing and in charge of nothing. And so comes the word of God today. It doesn't matter who you are. God can speak to some person who dresses like a jerk, that eats crunchy insects, that has no steady job. He can talk to anybody. Matter of fact, how many mothers have we got here? Put your hands up if you're a mother. Would you let your daughter date John the Baptist? You'd probably not even let him sit on your living room sofa. Now, let's look at very quickly at what was wrong with John the Baptist, because I want you to see that God can use anybody. First of all, I am sure that today John the Baptist would never make it in ministry. Number 1, he wore the wrong clothes. He definitely did. When I first began to minister, I came from New Zealand. Some of you know that my family and I come from a little country that has 80 million sheep in it and 3 million people. It's called New Zealand. It is way down under, and our only distinction is probably we're the uttermost part of the earth from Jerusalem, unless you go to the South Pole. So we can tell people you've not fulfilled the Great Commission until you've preached in my home nation. Now, New Zealand basically is a very quiet, up until recently we began to import rowdy Americans and others. It was a very quiet country. We had a murder about once every 18 years. It was something like that. I went from New Zealand to the United States and was put straight into Teen Challenge in New York City, where they had a murder every 18 hours. My very first witness, see, I was paranoid. I had absolutely no idea what I was doing. Mom Wilkerson, who is David Wilkerson's mother and is a combination of a great-grandmother sort of person and a sergeant major, she was going to give us some training, you see, Mom Wilkerson. So I'm there, you know, I'm thinking, oh, man, there's addicts and murderers and all kinds of people going to be talking to here. I've never spoken anything more radical than a demon-possessed sheep. And here I am. Well, I said, Mom Wilkerson stood up, we sang choruses and stuff. She said, okay, we're going to go to Greenwich Village. Now, I heard of Greenwich Village. That's where the beatnik people used to be multitudes of years ago, and people in those days were eating acid on sugar cubes and weird things like that. I was a chemist. Acid is what you dissolve metals with. There were people here that ate acid. It just bothered me no end. Anyway, I said to Mom Wilkerson, do we get any training or anything? She said, are you saved? I said, yes. She said, are you baptized in the Holy Spirit? I said, do you think I would be here if I wasn't? She said, you're trained. Let's go. That was it. My entire training. I was throwing, kicking, and screaming into a wolf's den. I fell down in there, and the very first person I talked to, talk about clothes, first person I ever talked to had a leopard skin suit on. And I mean with the teeth and the tail and the whole trip and big gold hula hoops in his ears. It was unbelievable. That was the first person I spoke to. Then I met a real acid hitter. I met a person on acid. I didn't know. I sat down with him, and he was looking like this. You know, I'd track him for a little while just to see, you know. And I tried to witness to him, you know. I'm sharing 14 spiritual laws or whatever there was going around in those days. He just kept looking at me. You know, whatever I said, he just... So I don't know what, after 10 minutes of this, I was getting nowhere fast. This is called losing your audience. I never had one to begin with. I'm trying to talk to this guy. And finally I got mad, you know. I said, excuse me, I said, you know anything about God? And he looked at me. And he said, God? And I thought, this is communication. See? Wonderful. Should have got straight down to it in the first place, not introduce yourself and all this. Get into it. God. He said, I am God. That's it. Okay? John the Baptist would never have made it in the ministry because he dressed wrong. He would have been at home in a place like Greenwich Village. Imagine the first church of Jerusalem out on a Sunday school picnic, and they happen to be cutting past the desert. And as they stop for a potty break there, and all the kids get out of the bus, they hear this sound coming across the desert. And the bus driver goes to check it out, and here's this guy. He's been practicing with snakes and stuff. And he comes, you snakes! He's talking to these snakes. And they come over the hill. He's so used to speaking to animals, he goes, you bunch of snakes! To these Sunday school people. They tell you that if you're going to minister to people, you've got to dress right. So you've got to have tie-dyed T-shirt and bib overalls and a big wooden cross around your neck. See? Got to wear your hair the correct length, which varies every 15 seconds. John the Baptist never would have made the ministry. I can imagine those people coming up from First Jerusalem Church saying, John, we want to share with you something. We feel you have a good message, but your image requires some serious help. And we'd like you to take this Bank of Jerusalem card and go down to Jerusalem Marcus and get yourself a decent three-piece suit, and then you'll be able to share with people more effectively. You know what John the Baptist said? You bunch of snakes. You know, it is embarrassing to watch people try and communicate with people that they fondly imagine as their audience. You know, have you ever seen a preacher try to talk to a group of kids? He's never talked to kids for 20 years, but they've asked him to speak in a youth camp, see? So he goes and he buys the requisite stuff. You know, he gets the jeans that have the question mark on, so you get to guess who he is. And he gets the little alligator here, so you know he comes from the swamps. He has all the right stuff on, see? And he gets up there and he's got a wig on perhaps, and he's got his living Bible and denim, and he gets up and he goes, hi there, young people, I really dig what you're into. And they're all up the back throwing up. They can't possibly believe this. I think the Bible point here is this. God doesn't look at the outward appearance. Sometimes you have to make shifts and changes and modifications in your exterior appearance in order to fit in with the natives. We all understand that. But you also got to be real. Kids, bottom line for them is, are you real? They're looking for people who are real. And that means a kid will be much more comfortable with you if you just are who you are and tell them the truth instead of trying to be trendy. It's embarrassing to see all these little wannabes dressing up like Madonna so they can all be different. Isn't that embarrassing? Secondly, John didn't eat right. Imagine going out to eat in Wendy's with John afterwards, and he orders a grasshopper burger. See, two things here about John. First, the outward image is not what God is concerned about. He's looked at the heart. Second thing is, the major test in our lives and in our ministries, when we set up training programs for different organizations and ministries, I'm going to give you one of the secret training things we used to do. We'd never tell the people when they came. We'd just say, listen to something we want you to do. So we had all these kids from different places. Sometimes they were the pastor's nicest young people, you know, and they came to this camp. We actually had 3 tests. But we use these tests to determine whether these people would make it in ministry or not. They finished the New Testament the first 2 weeks they arrived. We gave them a bunch of study stuff to do. But they thought that the way you pass tests is that you get, you read hard and you memorize and stuff, and then you fill in the blanks, and if you get 100% right on your paper, that means you'll make it. But that wasn't really the test. That was just all training, see? The real test, we gave them 3 things. First test we gave them was we took them out and had them play a game of volleyball. This is called the test of play. Okay? Well, these kids arrived, and most of them went out there and said, volleyball, Texas, volleyball? Imagine playing volleyball. Anyway, they went out and played. One guy, though, was spiritual. He sat under a bush with a large Bible. So, fine. He went out and said, excuse me, he said, we're playing volleyball. Oh, he said, I don't feel led to play volleyball. I feel led to sit under this bush and meditate on the scriptures. We said, you don't understand, this is something everybody's going to be doing, just playing volleyball right now. He said, well, I don't really feel led. He said, well, you've got a medical problem. We'll pray for you now if you do. No, I don't. I just don't feel led. We're going to say, we feel led. We feel led to put you on a bus and send you home. Get out there and play volleyball. Why do we say that? Because we're cruel and we hate people. No, because it's amazing what your real character looks like when you play games. Have you ever watched some of these church baseball or basketball teams? You ever seen that? The blessed Bible-believing Baptists come against the Holy Mother, Heart of God, Catholic team, and you've seen them pray, and they're like, oh, God, help us, and the others, going through checking out all the positions, and it's all very, then they get to go, stop. Isn't that interesting, see? You ever seen a perfectly godly pastor become demon-possessed because a small white ball would not minister to his conceit by going into the right hole at the right time? Have you seen that? There are some board games that bring demons out of people. Risk, for instance. You ever play Risk? All right, you're dying. Okay? So play is one of the best ways that God finds out what you like. Okay? So we had them play. They didn't know the real test was there. The second major test we give them is work. Work, you'll notice, is a 4-letter word. Work. You can imagine when people came for training in spiritual things, we gave them work. Work. What kind of work did we give them? We picked it very carefully. We found out what they didn't like and gave that to them. If kids love dishes, we put them on gardening. If they love gardening, we put them on dishes. If they love both gardening and dishes, we always had toilets to clean. We had one guy who loved gardening, enjoyed washing dishes, cleaned toilets for a living. He was a janitor. We did not know what to do with this person. I think we put him on Bible study, which he hated. Okay? Why do we do stuff like this? See, anybody, any old person, can do a job that you like and enjoy it. It takes a real Christian to do something that is hard, that is difficult, that is a real problem, and still sing. So we would watch him, I was like, dishes, man, I came to the school to get away from dishes. I have to do dishes all the way at home. See? Oh, I will do the dishes today, see? And then tomorrow, what's your job? Dishes. Dishes! I had dishes yesterday. So you will have dishes for the next 27 years. If you don't learn this lesson, it'll be another time around the dishwasher feet. See, and when they finally said, oh, praise God, dishes again, ooh, and then we knew we were ready to shift them on to gardening or something. You understand? The best way, your great tests will not come when you're standing in front of thousands of people to preach because you've learned all this stuff. Your great tests will come in the simple things in life. In work, for instance. I have never, ever found that Jesus Christ uses a lazy person. He always gets busy people. He always comes to people who've just got so much to do they can't possibly do any more. It is to him that he comes and says, follow me. Jesus never comes to hermits sitting in caves meditating on their or Shirley MacLaine's navel. He just, because living in a hole will not make you holy. Okay? He always uses busy people. And the last one, the big test. This is the big test. Eat. Sometimes in these training schools, like we put out oatmeal, porridge or something in the morning, and no sugar one morning. No explanation, just no sugar. And the kids would sit down and they'd go, "Excuse me, where's the sugar?" "Oh, no sugar this morning." "What? What do you mean no sugar?" "There's no sugar this morning." "No sugar? What do you mean? How can you eat oatmeal without, we out of sugar? I'll buy some sugar, man." "No sugar this morning." "What in the world? Look, hey, can we borrow some sugar, all right? I got money. I can buy some. Look, I'll run to the store and get sugar. There's no way." See that? Isn't it interesting? These are the same people who said, "I'll go where you want me to go, dear Lord, on mountain land." And you know that, see? "Where he leads me, I will follow. What he feeds me, I will." So they said all of that stuff. Said it was big mouth. You go into catalepsy over no sugar? How are you going to do with the swelling of the Jordan and monkey eyeballs? How are you going to handle that, Jack? See, eating, just such a simple thing. I mean, just there. First complaint in a can, "Yeah, food is, yeah, it's not like my mommy made." Always like that, isn't it? Well, eating is a great test, see? John the Baptist had to eat these crunchy insects and wild honey. It's a very weird diet. The point is, in all of these things, that God loves to train us by unexpected means. Some of you remember the movie Karate Kid. Those of you who are too godly to go to movies, I'll explain it to you so that you will not have to go and see this and spoil your spirituality. But basically, in this movie, there is a young man who, he would like to learn karate, and but he runs early into his transfer into California from an eastern city to a bunch of demon-possessed kids who always beat the cheese out of him and everything. He goes in to get some training in karate so he can defend himself, only to find that these same demon-possessed kids sitting under the tutelage of a much more demon-possessed Marine who is training them. See, so he is up the creek without a paddle, this young man, until he meets Miyagi, his gentle sort of man about the motel general handyman type person who leaps over the fence one night and saves this young man by kicking the cheese out of these karate boys, and then enters him into some major karate tournament with a promise that he will train him on one condition, that he asks no questions. Okay? So gives the boy the requisite headband, and the boy is asked to report to his house. He comes over to Miyagi's house. He's getting ready to learn his first lessons, and the handyman gives him a tin of polish and a cloth with instructions to polish this huge bunch of old cars the guy had. And he goes to rub it on and goes, "No, polish on, polish off." So the kid goes, he's polish on, polish off, polish on, polish off. Well, the kid works, all his arms are sore and figures, I got to earn my keep somehow so I can get my karate lessons. Well, he reports, Miyagi looks, says, "Very good, come back tomorrow." Well, the following day he gets to sand the floor, and then he gets to paint the fence, and he gets to do all of these things, and he's not allowed to ask any questions. He finally goes crazy. The guy has a beautiful house now. It's painted, the cars are polished, the floor has been multiple sanded, and the kid is just so ticked off. He rips his band off. He says, "That's it." But, this tournament is like 6 weeks' time. He's got to come up against these boys who can kill people by looking at them the wrong way, and he's learned nothing at all. He says to the man, "I've just been your slave. I haven't learned any karate at all." And the old man goes, "Oh, really?" "Ah!" And the kid goes, "Oh." Now, God trains you like Miyagi. He trains you when you're not aware of it. And those things that you run through that look like just ordinary stuff is actually divine training. John the Baptist didn't eat right, but he did all right with God. We'll give you the other one, and then we'll move on. He wore a belt made of leather. By the way, belts, this was not your basic Pee Wee Herman belt. The Bible goes out of its way to mention it's not one of those kind of belts. The belts in those days were, have you ever seen weightlifters' belts? You know what the size of a weightlifter's belt is a major belt. They don't have these little trendy little Pierre Cardin belt. What you have is basically a major belt. You see, that sort of holds your whole stomach in here. When they have to hold those up, because if the belts pop, then so do they. So the Bible says it was a belt made of leather, and the Scripture speaks about truth, being belted with truth. And one of the things we're going to have to learn to do this, if God gives you an audience, you cannot become addicted to its approval. You understand? If God gives you an audience, and He will do that, you cannot become addicted to its approval. Now, a lot of the stuff we're going to be looking at this series is how to identify with an audience and how to make sure that they identify with you. We'll look at that. But here is a great danger. You can have an audience and get a very good audience, and when you get to that audience, because you've become addicted to the approval of that audience, you do not tell them the truth when you get them. For instance, there are some very good communicators in the world today. One of them has been around for donkeys years. Johnny Carson, for instance, is a person who comes to mind as somebody who can effortlessly, night after night, stand up, give you a digest of all the day's headlines, and give it back to you in a funny form, who could talk at great length with anybody on almost anything. You understand? There's a whole bunch of people. We've got some new ones like Morton Downey Jr., your basic loud interviewer. You've got guys like David Letterman who break all the rules by taking you behind and showing you and introducing you to all these nerdy people that ought not to be on television at all. You had all of these things, but here's the key thing. All of these people, though excellent communicators, do not say anything. You notice that? Nobody is ever going to put out a book on the philosophy that changed the world of Johnny Carson. You can't remember what they said. So we need to be people not only who have audiences, but when we have that audience, tell them something that will change their lives forever. John the Baptist wore a belt made of leather. He was not always, certainly not a popular man, definitely not a polished man, not even a funny man, a talented man, a particularly clever or exceptionally witty man. But John the Baptist was a truthful man. And above all, God wants you real. Real. I hate religious stuff. I do. I want to apologize right off the bat for any trace of religiousness that ever works itself into my soul. I come from an irreligious background. I come from a thoroughly pagan background. Not your basic murderous pagan background, just your nerdy pagan background. You understand? I have some friends with horrendous pagan backgrounds. They were snorting coke when they were 4 years old and murdered their mother by the time they were 7. And, I don't have that basic. I wish I had that testimony sometimes. It would be exciting. I could say, I killed 15 people before I got to be 12, and you better watch out. I don't backslide. I'll take you all out. I have friends in the ministries who had their faces blown off with phosphorus grenades and now can play the piano by ear and keep their eye on you, and all these. I wish I had testimonies like that sometimes. But I did have a very basic, nerdy background, I was just a lost person. I have no deep religious roots. Matter of fact, I'm Maori. That's my native race in New Zealand. And I tell people my only connection with religion is that some of my parents' ancestors were cannibals and used to eat missionaries. So you better watch out. I don't backslide. Some geek in Florida asked me 2 years ago, and I mentioned that, was that your first taste of religion? My next book is going to be How to Serve Your Fellow Man. The day you discover reality is the day you become a man or woman of God. The first thing the Holy Spirit does when He saves us is to make us real. M. Scott Peck wrote a best-selling book, probably one of the best books ever written on human evil in the last century, called People of the Lie. And what he does is analyze the nature of real evil, and it's amazing. Really evil people are not your monster movie evil. They are very often church people. They are people who dress nicely, who are nice, hardworking, middle class people. They haven't strangled people to death, but they are so evil that their whole lives are one giant lie. And the first thing Jesus does, who is the way and the truth, is to make you real. We will talk later on in the series about what we need to communicate when we get an audience. But it is important for us to see that this thing called the gospel is not a show. It is not something that you can learn just like some technique. It is what we're going to give you here are principles. Some of these principles can be learned. The bottom line is, when you have your audience, what do they see? And you need a sign to hang around your neck. I'm wearing mine tonight. You don't see it because it's an invisible sign, but it is there. My sign says this ministry is not for sale. See that? Can't buy it, can't bribe it. It will say what God wants it to say. And I think the world's hungry for people who, though they have a heart for everyone, when that person listens, are willing to say what God wants them to hear, whether they like it or not. You'll have to learn the difference between having a good time with your audience and having a good time with God. When I first started off, I said, hey, if I'm having a good time, it's wonderful. Everybody's getting saved and all that, see? If I feel terrible, it's awful. And nothing is happening at all. And I've found sometimes you can have a terrible time. You can be completely out of it. You have absolutely no idea what's going on. And God is doing all kinds of stunning stuff. On the other hand, you may have a wonderful meeting. Everything's going exactly the way you want it to be. And nothing is going on at all. You have to divorce yourself from the reactions of an audience and go by what God says and stick with that. That is very important, not only when things are going badly, and that helps. You plow on nevertheless. But when things are going good, it becomes even more important to listen to God. All right. Now, I want to just, I can throw this in the end. When I first came to this country, by the way, I wasn't preaching for a long time. See, I only want to do three things in life. Never travel, never meet anybody, see, and be a chemist. That was my three goals in life, okay? I would be a research chemist, never travel, never meet anybody. Then I made the mistake of becoming a Christian, and I got dragged kicking and screaming into the ministry. I've often told God when I'm got to stand out in front of a bunch of university or high school kids that eat Christians for breakfast with a Wheaties, I've often said to God, this was your idea. You got me into this. I wanted to be a chemist, remember? I'd be sitting in the sun sipping lemonade in New Zealand if you hadn't got me into this. Now, you better help me because I'm not going out there on my own. I'm just not doing it. That's great. You know, I'm looking basically Clark Kent looking for a phone booth when I'm out there back there. I remember when my first ministry is I'd sing in high schools and testify. I'd just come in classes and sing and do testimony. John Dawson did that too. A bunch of different people in youth evangelism started off music. My first Christian things were playing bongos in the darkest corner of a open air meeting. And that was I missed a lot of beats. I never even gave a testimony for a bunch of months. You know, a guy finally called me up and said, hey, when do you give a testimony? I said, testimony? Yeah, next week, all right? And so I wrote it all out in, longhand and two big legal-size sheets, both sides. And I got up there that night. He said, we got a guy here with a weird name. He's going to give us, he's going to tell what Jesus means. So I got up, looked, I couldn't read any of my notes. It was too dark. I must have given the shortest testimony in history. I said, yeah, I'm saved, amen. That was it, the whole thing. Said to me afterwards, that was all right, was a bit short. Okay? So I was singing in these high schools, secular high schools, and a kid came up and asked me, said, look, could you come and speak, could you sing and maybe share a testimony or something in our church? So I've asked the pastor, and he said it'd be all right for a Sunday night service. So I went along. And I sang and gave a short testimony. And then the pastor got up And he preached the worst message I have ever heard in my whole life. It wasn't that he wasn't a good communicator. The opposite was true. He was a very good communicator, but what he said was awful. He told kids you can live how you like, it doesn't matter, God doesn't care. And I'm sitting there going, I have just walked out of a 7-year study of spiritual awakening and the holiness of God, and I hear a guy who was a pastor and a shepherd of this flock telling his smiling congregation they could do what they like. That philosophy is all right in its right place, and that place is hell. But I see at the end, I didn't know what to say. Now, Leonard Ravenhill told me one time, he was in a meeting with somebody preached something like that. You know when the guy shakes hands at the door? Len said he got hold of his hand and he held it like that. He said, the Lord judge you. The Lord deal with you. The Lord bring you to you. The guy's trying to pull his hand out. I don't know what to do, see? Anyway, the pastor came up afterwards and he said, look, he said, I like the song. He said, could you speak to young people afterwards? So I said to the Lord, you want me to talk to this youth group? The Lord said, yes. So I said, okay. And then I thought, now what in the fat am I going to talk to them about? Okay, you know, it's a big Bible. There's a lot of stuff in this book. So I'm out in the back there saying to the Lord, what do you want me to speak about? Something safe? You know, like guidance or the meaning of the color of the thread on the tabernacle and its relationship to the millennium, something, you know, like that. I'm looking through this book, and boy, have you ever opened this and found nothing in it? It ever happen to you? It's got all this stuff in it, you can't find nothing. I open it, I'm looking, see, and I said, God, what? I don't know what to talk about. And this is what he said. You know what I want you to talk about. See, I got an audience now, no problem. Got 80 kids of a youth group that want to hear. Now I got to get a message. What do I talk about? You know, he said, what I want you to talk about. I said, that's got to be the devil. That can't be God. So I did the Blunk method. Have you ever used this? It's called Desperation Guidance City, all right? Have you ever done that? You've done that thing, the Blunk method? All you need is a few Judas went out and hung himself. And you go, oh, I can't be God. Try again. Go thou and do likewise. One more try. What you do more quickly. You know. So I blunked it. I said, God, give me something. Here's what my eyes fell upon. See? You therefore gird up your loins and arise and speak to them all that I command you. Be not dismayed at their faces, lest I confound you before them. God said, you say what I want you to say, or I'll make you look a jock. Okay? You know what it's like to be a nerd again? Right? So when I got this word, I claimed that I said, give me a blackboard, and I looked at the pastor left. I don't know what happened to him. He didn't come. I got up and I preached the exact opposite message. I talked about without holiness no man shall see the Lord, that unless you repent you will likewise perish. About an hour and a half later, the Spirit of God come boom on the whole. We were there till 2 in the morning. Kids were weeping and getting right with God. And the youth pastor said, we got to have a camp. Can we have a camp? Next weekend, can we have a camp? I said, sure. I wasn't doing anything else. So we had a camp, and almost the entire youth group got saved. About 6 months later, the pastor resigned. I don't have anything to do with that. I just, threw the bomb and left. And this youth pastor was appointed temporary pastor of this church until they found another one. Well, they never did find another one. He took over the church, and his life was squared away with God, and the church grew by leaps and bounds. The youth group was as large as the church. It was incredible thing. And finally, he did such a good job in that church with a revived youth group that they made him in charge of the entire denomination's youth program in California. And when they were looking for speakers for their statewide youth camp, guess who he asked to speak? And I stood there, with 500 kids, 3 or 4 camps like this in a row. And the first time I stood up, God said to me, you see what happens when you obey. Okay? Understand? It may not mean you'll be popular. God has never called us to do that. But it does mean you will make a real attempt to love and to speak the truth to your audience. Speaking the truth in love. That is the balance of these two things. To love the people you're going to talk to enough to die for them. But when they listen, tell them the truth. You know, and that really is our task that we are to look at. The last thing I'll leave you with John the Baptist before we take a very needed break before we all die of heat exhaustion is that John the Baptist did not give any invitations. You notice that? He didn't give an invitation. That really would knock him out of the ministry today. He, in Matthew 3:2, and said stuff like, repent ye. That's not really an invitation. See, you know the difference between an invitation and a command? You get an invitation to a birthday party when you're a little kid? You ever, somebody writes you a little card and says, please come to my birthday party. We're going to have cake and jello and bring a big present. Okay? Now that is an invitation. When you get one of those, you can look at it and go, this person's a total geek. I'm not going to go to that party. I haven't got money to buy a present anyway. Forget the cake. Or you can go, yeah, I really like it. I had a good time last time I was there. I'm going to go. See, that invitation's called take it or leave it. In this country, however, if Uncle Sam, you got to be 18, 19 years old, and Uncle Sam could send you a notice. And this was true in the 1960s. You could get this notice. It appeared in your letterbox and said, you will report at such and such. This was not an invitation. It didn't say you are cordially invited by Uncle Sam to come down to the induction depot where we will shave all your hair off, take all your clothes away, and give you a new identity. Welcome, Superman, to the world of the army. That is not an invitation. That is a command. You see the difference between the two? John the Baptist did not give invitation. He gave commands. If you notice Jesus' ministry, he didn't give invitations. He gave commands. He said stuff like this. For instance, here's Jesus. Here's the guy up in the tree. His name is Zacchaeus. Jesus points out to Zacchaeus as he's going past. He says, Zac, get out of your tree. I'm going to come and have lunch at your house. Zac crawls out of the tree. He runs back to the house. Poor Mrs. Zac. She is in the house. She looks at the path. Here comes Zac running up the path at high velocity, closely followed by Jesus and the 12 disciples. Zac goes, hey, guess who's coming for dinner? Mrs. Zac is trying to smile at Jesus. Hi. And when Zac comes in the house, first she goes, Zac, come here. Gets him in the kitchen. What do you think you're doing? What are you doing inviting Jesus and the 12 disciples for lunch? The house is a mess. We don't know. The kids are all a mess. We haven't got hardly anything to eat in this house. Why in the fat did you invite Jesus to lunch? Zac says, I didn't invite him. He just invited himself. See? Who was this Jesus? He talks like he's God or something. He talks like he's the ruler of the universe or something. He just comes, says, follow me. I mean, here is Jesus' entire ministry. It is his sermon, it is his invitation, quote unquote, and it is his follow-up. 2 words. Follow me. That's it. It's the whole thing. Not 47-hour lecture series, not the glories and joys of joining with the Christian faith. It's just follow me. And if you did, you're a disciple, and if you didn't, you weren't. Just like that. Boy, that's a scary thing. John the Baptist and Jesus could not have made it in the ministry today. Os Guinness has a neat thing. He calls it the smorgasbord factor. You know what a smorgasbord is? You know the difference between a smorgasbord and a cafeteria, for instance. Okay, cafeteria, you like Luby's or something, you pay for every item. You want broccoli and cheese, you pay for it. If you want meat, you pay for it. See, you pay for each item. The smorgasbord, you pay one price, you get whatever you like. You walk into this thing, and there are 2 kinds of people who go to smorgasbord. Let's say a real large smorgasbord, twice as long as this room. Big smorgasbord. Two kinds of people. The first kind of person heads up to what they always eat. Where's the chicken? You know? Go straight for it. That's it. And then there's you. The other option goes like this. You look at it and you do one of two things. Either you take a plate and you put everything on the plate. I got to, this, look at it. Yes, this is great. They got this. See, and finally you come up with this plate that's no human being in the universe can eat, unless you got an alien that lives in your chest, you know. Nobody can eat this. Nobody can eat that. And that's just your salad plate. Or you do the other thing. And the other thing is this. You endlessly circle. Come on. See? Can't decide. See? So many options. You're not sure what to have. Now, when I lived in California, in Northern California for a short time, there was a restaurant there out of the little town near the town of Sebastopol. And this restaurant has only three things. There's no menu. They only sell steak, fish, and chicken. That's it. There is no menu. And the waitresses have a thing of being rude to people. Okay? So you walk in, you go, the menu? Menu? There's no menu. Look, we got steak, fish, chicken. What do you want? You go, see? This is the opposite of a smorgasbord. You've been to a large restaurant, they bring you a 42-page menu, about this long, and the waitress comes back 15.3 seconds later, says, have you decided? You know that? You don't even know where to see that? Now, here's the point. As your options increase, commitment decreases. Okay? The more options you have, the less chance there is of you committing yourself. That's called the smorgasbord factor, Os Guinness. Okay? When you're brought to a restaurant that only has two choices, fish or chicken, it makes it simple. I go chicken. Chicken. Yes, chicken. Definitely chicken. See? Here's what God gives us. Straight and narrow way that leads to life. Broad road that leads to destruction. No middle road for those who can't hack either. Okay? He gives us this. A fountain cannot bring forth sweet water and bitter at the same source. That's why the gospel is not an invitation. It is a command. It is wrong for us to live outside of the rulership of the living God. It is not only wrong, it is crazy. Some years ago, I was in Australia, and a guy said, what did you come to Australia for? You know, these circular interviewers, these reporters that stick ice cream cone microphones under your nose and ask you questions about, what do you think of, you know, that thing. What did you come to Australia for? I said, I came to do in a tiny way what Jesus would do if he came in person to Australia. Well, what is that? I said, God is out to do two things, to make us happy and to make us holy. And he knows we'll never get to be happy until we get to be holy. Well, what does that holy mean? Well, it's very simple. God is out to do two things, to make us wise and to make us good. See, in the Eastern idea of the word holy, a holy man's a wise man. See? Hinduism has 330 million deities, and not all of them are nice. But being holy doesn't necessarily mean that you're good. It just means you're perceptive. A holy man is aware, perceptive. He's enlightened. He knows what's going on. He has he's tasted the inner nectar. He has sipped on the ultimate light. He has, he's tasted his post-nasal drip. He is a wise person. In the West, the word holy means good, but usually stupid. Naive. Good, holy man, sort of like. Isn't that funny? You ever seen it's always the mad scientist? The guy's brilliant, but evil, you know that thing? The good guy is always a moron. He accidentally trips up the lever that blows up the mad scientist's castle, see? And the idea comes across that good is all right, but you're basically a nerd, if you're good. that kind of. Now, what do you think the Bible word holy means? God is light. God is love. The Bible word holy actually means both of these things, wise and good, which means this, that when God saves us, he not only gets our hearts, he gets our heads. God has never said, be transfigured by the removal of your mind. So in other words, God is out to do two things: to deliver us from selfishness, the essence of sin, and stupidity. The evil of the mind is ignorance or stupidity. The evil of the will is sin. The evil of the body is sickness. God is against all evil. Okay? I was in a university many years ago in California. A kid stood up, he said, why follow Jesus? I said, well, what alternatives do you have? I'm always interested in alternatives. I said, who do you think we should follow? He said, why does it have to be Jesus? Why couldn't it be somebody else? I said, like who, for instance? He, being modest, humble, and unassuming, said, like me, for instance. Why doesn't everybody just follow me? I said, that's easy. You're not smart enough and you're not good enough. Sit down. God is the best qualified to rule our lives because he is ultimate light and love. He is the wisest person in the universe. You never hear Jesus going, oops, I blew that. I shouldn't have done that. See? And he is absolutely right in what he does. All of his ways are perfect. And God wants us to be small reflections of what he is like. Okay, John the Baptist understood that. He did not give an invitation. All right, let us take a break. One of the strangest times in all of man's history, the 1990s have actually begun. I don't know if you're aware of that, but they have actually started. And you understand that the different decades are actually consciousnesses. There are some places in this country that are in the 1990s. There are some places in this country that are still in the 1940s. So when we talk about these decades, think of them rather as ideas, as massive movements or shifts in a culture. What I want to do in this session here is to try and give us a perspective of where we are and where things are going to, because it is important whenever we speak about communicating to set things in the context of our audience. I want to start off by mentioning this. Young people are the single largest, unreached, unnoticed, hidden peoples group in the world. I was in a major evangelical congress about a year or so ago, and for an entire 10 days that we were there, we studied various kinds of evangelism. And one of the major presentations during that time was a very well done multimedia presentation of the hidden peoples groups of the world. And I thought it was very, very effective. But it struck me as we neared the end of the week there that the largest single unreached peoples group in the world had not even been mentioned during the entire time. And that is what is now over 51% of the world, the population that is under 21 years old. Okay? In many, many places in the world, this population is the majority. Mexico City, for instance, median age of a country like the U.S., Chicago, perhaps would be around 30, 31 years old. Mexico City, which would be the largest city in the world at the end of this decade, median age 14.2. Okay, Latin America, over 67% of Latin America under 30 years old. Read China, average age 16 years old. We're talking about a world filled with young people. Much of what we look at then in these series will be dealing with specifically ministering to the largest population group. Now, a lot of what we say will also apply to any kind of mission field, because we're going to be studying and looking at what is necessary to change, to learn from your culture and how to learn from that, and to put some kind of feedback loops into your ministry. So you keep modifying the way you're saying things to maintain your audience. Now, this is especially true with young people because it is quite possible for a missionary to go to some places in India, for instance, and minister exactly the same way as a missionary would have done 1,000 years ago. No different. Which means the culture stays essentially the same. But with kids, you have a mission field that shifts every week, if not every day. And we're rapidly coming to a time when, I think it was Andy Warhol said, in the future, everybody will be famous for 15 minutes. This rapid shift thing. Now, to put all this in perspective, let's go to the book of Ezekiel, and we will look at these last 3 decades, the 80s, and then I'll give you a little projection on the 90s, which I said in some places have actually arrived. In Ezekiel 37, we have a strange thing happen to this man, Ezekiel. The hand of the Lord was upon me, and he carried me out in the spirit of the Lord, and he set me down in the midst of a valley which was full of dry bones. You imagine you'd stand in there, your basic prophet, having visions and things, and the Spirit of the Lord reaches out, grabs you, and you find yourself carried. You had a dream when you were flying or floating? Have you ever had that dream? How many of you have ever had the floating dream? You remember that thing? Have you ever had that? There's another scary one. What about the standing on top of a high building and everything starts to fall dream? You ever had that one? That's a scary one too. I'll give you some more scary ones later. But anyway, this one must have been scary. Here in this vision, he is carried out, and then he hangs over a valley. And when he looks down, because we read it's full of dry bones. Let's put it like this. He looked down and saw a lot of smashed dead people. See? Now, then God asks him a question. Son of man, can these bones live? Now, as you're hanging there in the air over this valley, certain questions might occur to you if you were a fairly sharp prophet. Question 1 would be, how did all these people below me die? Question 2 would be, is it possible that they died by being dropped from a very large height? For example, i.e., the height I am presently at. And question 3 might occur to you is this question that God is asking me now a trick question? And question 4 will be, what happens if I get the answer wrong? So what would you say if that happened to you and you're looking down at a bunch of very, very dead people and God says, can these bones live? Whether you said, well, of course not, they're dead. You might hear, unbelief. Ah! See? You said, well, yes, obviously, yes. Presumption. Ah! See? So this is a valuable lesson from Scripture. Here's what he said. Oh, Lord, you know. That, my friend, is a great answer. God asks you questions. That's a good one. Oh, Lord, you know. That's a great answer. Anyway, he's hanging up there. Now, William Barclay said, there has never been a time when it has been more difficult to be a Christian. And there has never been a time when it was more necessary. And what I want to do is to take this parable, of course, of Israel being restored as a nation, and use it instead as a parable of the last 3 decades of human history. What, to all accounts, is probably the most turbulent, change-loaded, scary, and apocalyptic 3 decades of all of Western man's history. We have, first of all, this image. We have a lonely prophet, just him hanging above a valley. And I'm going to use this first part as a symbol of the 60s. 60s, of course, are very hard to get over. There's a lot of people who still live in the 60s. Some people got saved in the 60s. They've never got over being saved in the 60s. Arthur Blessed got saved in the 60s. Arthur Blessed is still a preacher from the 60s. It's wonderful to sit in a banquet where everybody's dressed in tuxedos and Arthur's there with his blue jean suit on and his cross parked nearby. This is a cool thing. 1960s, what word could we put to encapsulate that incredible decade? Let's use this word, the radical 60s. Everything in the 1960s was radical. In the streets, there were three major things that we saw. First, people became very individualistic. The reason why this was important, individualistic, okay? The reason why this is important is because this is the first generation of Western young people that began to realize that they'd been told this thing. You are nothing but time plus chance plus matter. Okay, this is Francis Schaeffer's equation. Time plus chance plus matter equals man and the whole universe. That's the equation given to kids with their Wheaties in the morning. Right? You're told, you see those dinosaurs and all that slime and stuff, man? What happened is that lightning basically hit ammonia vapor and some methane and water vapor. Got some basic amino acids together, and then they got together to sort of form DNA things, and, you know, microcapsules sort of... Oh, I love getting on that Disney World ride, you know, that takes you forward and they show you this little... You know, you go and smell the dinosaurs, and I love that ride. Get on it, and they show this film of all these little amoebas being zapped by sunlight, and they go, somehow, lightning or perhaps solar energy or one of these things struck primeval chemicals and created the first life. And I go, ah! You know, they try to throw me off that ride every time I get on. But it's really a very funny thing. Hilarious. I'm a chemist, you know. Making them large molecules really hard because you've got to glue things onto other ones to stop things from falling off in the wrong places. And we can't make big molecules on purpose sometimes. You ever try to do them by accident, man? From goo to you by way of the zoo? This is cool. See? Frog plus princess kiss equals handsome prince. This is called fairy story. Frog plus 10 billion years equals handsome prince. It's called science. Now, if we look at our equation here, time plus chance plus matter, time plus chance plus matter equals man and the universe. It's the equation kids in the 60s grew up with. Then, as Francis Schaeffer pointed out, time is impersonal, unless you believe in Father Time. See? Chance is impersonal, and matter is impersonal, unless you believe in personal hydrogen atoms. And I had a guy in L.A. send me a 18-page study on the personality of the hydrogen atom. At least he was thinking. Schaeffer pointed out it's very hard to find in almost 200 years of philosophy how three impersonals can make a person. Okay? So what happened is that man got put into the equation and he got turned into a machine. And that's why when kids begin to realize, I'm just a machine. There's no personality, no love, no dignity, no truth. Those things mean nothing. It's just chemicals reacting to their environment. We had a guy there called B.F. Skinner. B.F. Skinner. He was Burhouse. I never found out the F, probably Frankenstein. But Dr. Skinner is a behavioral psychologist, and he wrote a book some years ago called Beyond Freedom and Dignity. And his basic point, well thought through point, that we are nothing more than chemicals reacting to their environment. That's all we are, just a bag of chemicals. The reason you're here today is a chemical reaction. So love means nothing, truth means nothing, dignity means nothing, freedom means nothing, truth means nothing. Which is a very strange philosophy, because if it is true, then it isn't. See? I had a friend in university in New Zealand who was in his third year of behavioral psychology. You know, their environment does influence it. But he said, I don't know what to do. Christian, this guy's a Christian. He said, I don't know what to say to my prof. I said, why don't you ask him what is the value and purpose of this course? So we waited till the end of the lecture. He said, excuse me, sir. What is the value and purpose of this course? The guy, well, you know, it has all kinds of value and purpose. And he went, oh. You see, if it's true, then it isn't. There is no purpose. There is no value. There is no meaning. There's nothing. That's why One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest was such a major movie. The really sane people are in asylum. See? Watch carefully. Look at this. See? If it's true that thinking makes you into a machine, see? Thinking. But you don't feel like a machine, then there must be something wrong with thinking. See? So what you do is you unplug your thinking, and you just feel. Right? And a whole generation did that in the 1960s. They seriously bought into what they'd been told from little kids. I am nothing more than time and chance and matter. I am a machine. I am an IBM card. Do not staple, fold, mutilate, or bend. See? But they didn't feel like machines. They felt like love and these things were real things. And so they said, you can't get it by thinking. So they did something like the guy who read somewhere that cigarette smoking causes cancer. So he decided to do something about it, and he gave up reading. Right? So they made this jump. This jump, Francis Schaeffer pointed this out in his first series of books, this jump was made in different ways, but it was basically done with ways that did not involve rationality. For instance, you could use sex. Sex does not require a vast amount of thought. See? You can use music. It is quite possible to experience music without thinking anything. Just feel it, you know? See? Or you could use drugs. You could eat something pink that would take you to strawberry fields forever. You could maybe go to some guru who, if he did not pinch your bottom like he did with Mia Farrow, would perhaps give you a way of enlightenment, whether it was Guru Maharaji chasing around in his Rolls Royce, eating Baskin-Robbins ice cream and calling you to taste your post-nasal drip, or the Maharishi with the flowers and very good, that stuff. There are different ways to do this. For instance, the Beatles, who were, there was a group before Wings that Paul McCartney was in, and this group did some songs in those early days. One of them went like this. It's called I Am the Walrus. Okay, it went like this. Yellow matter custard dripping from a dead dog's eye. Crabberlock, a fishwife, pornographic priestess. Boy, you've been a naughty girl, you let your knickers down. I am the Eggman, they are the Eggman, I am the Walrus. Goo goo goo. Now, when you were a parent flipping through channels and came across yellow matter custard dripping from a dead dog's eye, you went, what is that, see? Now, here's the question. What does this song mean? Try to handle it up here, see? Can't handle it with this, see? It's this one. See, try this. Yellow, matter, custard, dripping from a dead dog's eye. See? Just words strung together. How about this one? Here come old Flat Top. He come grooving up slowly. He got juju eyeballs. He went holy roly. He got hair down to his knees. Got to be a joke. He just do what he please. Can you draw that guy? See, these are not to be handled with this. And the philosophy of abandonment, you could call this bottom one, if you like, rationalism. The philosophy in reaction to that was one called existentialism. And if you had to ask what that was, it meant you didn't understand it. See that? You can't explain it, you experience it. When Neil Diamond sang, I said, I am that I. When he sang about no one was there, not even a chair. See, little 8-year-old kids got into it. I am. They don't understand what it meant. I mean, what is that? I am. See, they've never heard of Jean-Paul Sartre or Camus or any of these characters, but when they got to university and they read them, they said, I always believed that, man. I believed that, see? They learned it when they were 8 years old in a song. Philosophers of our day do not sit in university chairs behind mics and recording studios. And that's why music is the edge of a culture. If you want to find out what's going on in the culture, look at the fringes, and you'll see prophecy of what is to come. We'll look at music in a second. But in our time, see, if you get a grasp of that, a whole generation abandoned rationality, said there is nothing in that, and from the thinkers we move to the feelers. And if it is true that the only way you can really find meaning in life is to abandon all rationality, then true meaning in life is found in madness. That's the cuckoo there. Okay? Now, in the 1960s then, were very philosophical. Have you noticed the music of the 1960s? You ever listen to some of those 60s type songs? I'm not talking about the hangovers from the 50s. I'm talking about the late 60s as the philosophies began to gather, and the most creative period probably in the Western world was right at that block of time. A lot of rules were being broken, a lot of new things. In the 60s, for instance, the 60s was the natural look, okay? A guy went out on stage. Instead of looking like Elvis Presley with a gold lame suit on, certainly not like Fred Asparagus, with whom you had dance class music. Yeah, this guy was out there. He looked like the janitor or something until then you realize, well, this guy, shoot, he's the star. You know, that was all natural. It was sort of like, you know, it's just me. I gotta be me. You know, it was that kind of thing. And real feelings and seriousness and confessions and struggles and sincerity and against all pretensions. And we had Barry Maguire's massive song, Eve of Destruction. We had, don't you understand what I'm trying to say? You know, can't you feel the fears I'm feeling? You know, if the button is pressed, there's no running away. There'll be no one to save with the world in the grave. And shoot, everybody thought, oh, this is true. See, because if that's all you are, if this equation is true, then some jerk who pushes the button is going to lose not just us, but all that has ever been us. There's no heaven in this equation. No hell in this equation. No God, no life after death. Just us. Okay? So that, in the 60s, you introduced the first generation growing up without a potential future. Now, I don't mean just for a culture, but for everybody, everywhere. This is very powerfully seen in a Swedish movie. I mean, a play, actually. It was an opera, a rock opera, done in Swedish, but it was still all right. And for those of you who are Swedish, in this, some kids stole a first faster-than-light starship. I'm going to do a kind of the standard old starship here. They, like Jefferson airplane, who became Jefferson Starship, who became Starship, who became, I don't know where they became now, they threatened that they would hijack the first faster-than-light ship and then take a select group of people who were tired of all the pollution, noise, and war of the world and go to another star system, perhaps Alpha Centauri, and find another Earth-type planet and begin again. So this Swedish rock opera is set in that context. The stage opens, you're inside the rocket, and they're all singing, and everything's beautiful, and the moon is in the 7th house, and Jupiter is aligning with Mars, and peace is guiding the planets, and Earth is out here. It's out in space, and they're getting ready to set up preparations for the hypers jump or whatever that stuff is, that, you know, when they go. Anyway, they're all singing away, and it's a lot of fun, until suddenly there's a tremendous, oh, I've got to remind you, music is coming from Earth. That's not what they're dancing to. The music from Earth is actually John Cage's music, or music like it. John Cage, Francis Schaeffer pointed out, was the guy who tried to write music the way we're supposed to have got here, by chance, by time, by randomness. So what he'd do is he'd throw dice down for a start, and wherever the dice fell, he put the notes, or it wasn't good enough, so he threw I-Ching sticks, and wherever they went. So he wrote music of chance and music of changes, and he had robot conductors that were unprogrammed. He would have had android musicians if he could have afforded them, and they were playing this chance music. So I bought from the library one of John Cage's albums. It was 27 bucks, and this is what the music sounded like. That was it. 27 bucks, the whole thing. Eh? What was he trying to do? Well, if this wonderful thing called man and all this beautiful thing around us came that way, surely you should be able to do it by watching yourself. You see that? And it wasn't happening. So that's the kind of music that was coming from Earth over these speakers, and that's why they're leaving. And when they're doing this, right in the most key point, suddenly there's a brilliant blue-white flash outside the porthole. Seconds later, the sound from Earth is cut off like this, and then that blue-white flash rapidly decays down through yellow, orange, red, and the whole ship is shaken, thrown around. Everybody is smashed against the place. What happened? Some idiot back home pushed the button. Okay? There is no Earth now. It's gone. Now, have a look around you. Let us assume that our audience here tonight is in that ship. You and I are all that is left of the human race. Now, have a look around you. That's it. No other humans. All gone. We're in serious trouble here. Okay? So, this is the last chance. Understand, your parents, relatives, friends, enemies did not go to heaven or hell, or they went into dust and gas and ashes. They went back to hydrogen. They went back to nothing. See? It's a modern play. The kids keep singing. They felt like Princess Leia did when she comes out to her home planet. Got a bad feeling about this. And there it is. It's just gas and dust and rocks. The Death Star has caught up with it. There goes her relatives, her friends, her civilization, her record collection, everything. Nothing left. Okay? How do you feel? Well, they keep singing. Perhaps more bravely, they keep singing. And then the captain comes back from the front of the ship. This is the last few seconds of the play, and he's not singing, he's not smiling, and he says, the blasters, the Strider guidance system, we're out of control, and we're heading into the sun. This is the end of the human race. Then the curtain goes down, it's the end of the play, you go home. How do you feel? See that? See, in the 1960s, people for the first time understood what it meant not to have a future. And your generation now being brought up with parents and even grandparents who felt that. All right. That's why, having said all of that, kids came back with a me, see? Not machine. Notice how the hippies used to dress? They all wear blue jeans. What is a blue jean? It is a mass-produced item, and they usually wore the price tag still on them. But the uniqueness was the way you wore them and what you put on. So you made your own little things. You had feathers, you had wood, you had leather, you had glass, you had metal, you did all these little things. You went down the streets in the 60s, you'd see Indians, and you'd see all kinds of different people. And there was one thing no self-respecting hippie ever wore, and that was plastic. You know what plastic is? It's mass-produced. It is time, chance, and matters. Yeah, toothbrush. See that? You want a different one? Different color. Blue. Pink. Like this, see? And kids call the culture plastic. Mass-produced, no art, no value, no individuality. So it was a 1 is the loneliest number that you'll ever know. It's the lonely prophet. That's the 60s. One person out there demanding some kind of dignity, some kind of freedom, the free speech movement, the free this, the free that. Remember all that stuff? Free speech movement? Okay. Having said that, let me give you 2 more. We said it was individualistic, existential. You understand what that means? Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. And independent, a reaction to the mass consciousness thing. What was going on in the church in the 60s? The radical movement, charismatic movement. All these perfectly normal Anglicans were doing weird things, having prayer meetings. People were being slain under the power. There were people saying funny languages that they'd never learned. There was a church renewal movement. And then, scariest one of all, there was the Jesus movement. You knew what a Christian looked like up until the 1960s. The white Anglo-Saxon Protestant Republican cheerleaders. Suddenly there's these people, hair. You'd be minding your own business in a safe way. And this guy with a Bible as large as a piano would come up and right there between the diapers talk to you about Jesus and ask you embarrassing questions that your pastor would never speak about. And he'd get in his van and drive away into the sunset. And the key word in the church there was the work of the Spirit and experience. Have you had an experience with Christ? Have you had an experience of renewal? Have you experienced the power of the Holy Spirit? Have you experienced? Jimi Hendrix asked, have you experienced? See? That's the 60s. What we got in the church is a bunch of dead, dry, scattered bones. And this is what God said. Preach to the wind. Now, if God says that and you're still hanging up there, you are not going to disobey. You don't go, what? Are you serious? Oh, yes, you're God. You're serious. You want me to talk to the wind? Oh, okay. Come, oh wind. Breathe. He prophesies. He preaches first. Preaches. Preach to these bones. Preach. Go preach to those bones. Then you've got the hammer, the stirrup, and anvil on. They're all disconnected. There's head over here and leg here. Preach. Fingers. Knee bone connected to the thigh bone. Isn't that a weird experience? 60s, that's what it was. Bones coming together. All right? That's your first stage. Time is gone, has it not? Did you hold up a hand and wave it? You didn't wave a hand? All right, okay. As long as you didn't wave a hand, we will give you point 2. 2. The bones come together. 1970s. What is the word we will put on the 70s? Let us call them the therapeutic 70s. What happened in the 1970s? Everybody tried to recover from being radical in the 60s. In this secular world, the idea of community came in. You know, we belong to a planet full of people. We must think of the environment. We must save the whales. For Star Trek 4, we must save these whales. We have dwindling resources. We're running out of air and coal and water and proper things, and tensions are escalating. And so the big word came, self-help. We must help ourselves. Remember, I'm okay, you're rotten. Remember that book and other books? Looking out for number one bestseller, looking out for number one. I flew one time with a guy who wrote. I was sitting next door to a guy who wrote one of those things. And his premise was everybody's selfish. You just got to live with it. And he says there's 4 kinds of people. Those who are totally selfish and know it, those totally selfish and they don't know it, and those who are totally selfish and enjoy knowing it, and those who are totally selfish and don't think they are selfish, think they're unselfish. And those are the most dangerous kind of all, he said. So what does this guy do if he ever meets Jesus? Shock the living daylights out of him. What was happening in the church here? Bones coming together. All these dry things connecting up. So in the church you had community. Big lot of stuff. Brother, what we got to have is unity. We got to get together. You know, it's time we... A lot of stuff on self-acceptance. That was a big word, self-acceptance. You know, healing of the memories. A lot of us had memories needed healing. That was in there. We had a lot of family and marriage seminars. You see, in the lonely prophet mode, a guy could write in and say, get your family right with God. And his family wasn't right with God. See? You should love your wife. And he didn't love his wife. You should be kind to your children. And she wasn't kind to her children. She had Betty Davis eyes. Now, we had to get that healed. So one of the great rises was the seminars. There weren't any seminars in churches before. 70s, seminars came in. Bill Gothard exploded. Everybody wanted to know, how do you do the thing you're supposed to do? The prophets had said for 10 years, do this. Nobody said, how? How do we do that? And a man like Bill Gothard said, this is how you do it, with these 45 steps on how to do it. Okay? The key word there, where the other one was mystical, would be the reform stream of the Christian church. And we could probably say the thing that came into prominence there was the Word, Scripture. People said you had an experience with Jesus. Was it Jesus you had an experience with? The Jesus of the Bible. So you had an experience with the Spirit. What Spirit was it? See? Chapter and verse. See? All the Bible study stuff. The bones were coming together. And then the last one, the 80s. A decade which we're right on the verge of seeing out, and maybe the nervous 90s, unless the Lord comes in the next 3 days or so. Thought I'd better get this in just before we... What do we call the 80s? Here we go. Here's where God says, preach to the wind. Now, we got a funny thing. We've got something that looks like kind of an invasion of the body snatchers. Okay? We got these things coming together, and they're all connected there, very dead and dry, but at least together. Before they were not only dehydrated and desiccated, they were disconnected. They were all bits. Now they're all together, but still basically very dead. Then skin and flesh comes on, and now you have your normal congregation. Dead, but at least looking alive. Okay? And then the word comes, preach to the wind. Second part of it, preach to the wind. Come and blow on these slain, that they may live. And they stood on their feet, an exceeding great army. Word that we put across the 1980s, 60s, 70s, 80s. We actually have to use 3 words to describe the 80s. They were so strange. But the first word we will definitely use is the word militant. It was here that the Rambo movies, the Chuck Norris, right at the edge of the 70s where guys like Kane from Kung Fu came into prominence, remember? Peacefully kicking the cheese out of, in a relational, therapeutic way of various people. And it was sort of an acceptable form of violence because it was peaceful, hip violence. I've never got watching a Kane episode where there was a guy who was obviously from the Bible Belt, just by the way his eyes were crossed, and his tongue hanging out. Not like this, wearing his hat sideways. Basic religious cowboy came up. And Kane, you know, this cool Buddhist, he has strung this bow nobody else could string, and he's shooting for meditation purposes an arrow into a tree 1,000 yards away in the darkness, right? Like this, you know. And the guy comes up, and he goes to Kane. How do you do that? Kane goes, it is not done. The guy goes, I don't understand. When you do not understand, then you will know. Now, if a pastor said that, young people, when you do not understand, then you will know. People would drop their teeth laughing, man. But see, David Carradine was such a cool actor, people went, wow, that's so heavy. When you do not understand, then you will know. You know? We got back to Cuckoo's Nest. See, the transfer in the 80s, now Rambo became. See, look at this. I mean, basically, look at this. Here we are in the 80s, and we got characters now like this. Okay? We got Rambo, right? We got Rambette. Okay? We got all kinds of these Silverados, and these are heroes today. Matter of fact, they did some surveys on kids. Ooh, that was heavy, wasn't it? Heavy material. There's some surveys on kids. In the 60s, they asked, who are your heroes? And they had people like Billy Graham, my father, the Pope, the President, people like that. In the 80s, they did some surveys. And they were, number one, Clint Eastwood. See? Number one hero, Clint Eastwood. The new ones this year, interesting, so I'll give you those slides. Number one was Clint Eastwood, especially as Dirty Harry. Okay? And number two was Sly Stallone in the role of Rambo. That's the number one and two favorite heroes. And here's what's wild. They are fantasy characters. They do not exist, except on movies. But see this? Militant. That's the word. Another word we should put here. Apocalyptic. It's all the sort of the thought, it's coming. What? I don't know, but it's coming. These are the disappointed hippies of the 60s who did not expect to be here in the 80s. If you were saved in the 60s, we shouldn't be here now, right? Beast was supposed to be stamping stuff on people's hands about now. I had a friend who was making rubber hands for Christians. I said, if anybody buy those, they won't need a rubber head. They'll already have one. So what do we got in the 1980s? What have we just seen in this decade? Well, 1980s had two scary... One was 1984. You see, remember 1984 was really kind of the watershed year. That was the year that everything was supposed to come down. And the other word, the number was 2001. The idea was if we survive 1984, there's probably going to be a 2001. Unless Jesus comes in the next 5 or 6 days, of course. 1984 is gone. Some of us figuring, hey, we're still here, perhaps we should plan for something. Okay? There was the, what is this militancy? What is this reflection in the culture? I believe, and you see it in the music. See the shift in the music? What was 70s music? 60s was rock. What was 70s? Dance music, disco. Remember John Travolta? Remember him? Works in the hardware store during the week, but nighttime. You know, remember? 70s? The contrast between disco, for instance, and rock is real interesting. We see that rock was all, you know, Janis Joplin going, ah, you know, and screaming and realistic and all this thing. Disco, on the other hand, was unreal, was artificial, was exaggerated. It affirmed fantasy and frivolity and fun and fashion. And, you know, in rock, you sort of danced more or less with the person. But in disco, you were back to dancing class, you know. You had to sort of, dance music was, you worked out with your partner. You did all these intricate moves, you see. You still didn't touch them unless you're throwing them, but, you know. So the 60s were braless, lumpy, heavy, rough, and romantic. The 70s was sleek, stylish, smooth, controlled, and contrived. 60s was a mind trip, and it was cheap. Remember Echoes of the Mind, Windmills of the Mind, very philosophical, see? 70s, disco was a body trip, and it was expensive. In the 60s, you saw God in a grain of sand. In the 70s, you saw Jackie O in Studio 54. And then came the 80s. What kind of music characterized this decade? Bizarre, technological, frantic, apocalyptic. Heavy metal was introduced in a much more solid way. It was there in the 60s in germinal form. We had some very strange groups. Even the nice groups. We had groups like Blondie in the Cars and Traffic, and then groups like Devo and the Residents. The Residents were a very strange group. The Residents recorded for Ralph Records. Ralph means to throw up. The Residents were avant-garde with Neanderthal overtones. They had no names, no personalities, no faces, no backgrounds. They only had 4 concert appearances in 8 years, all unannounced. And heavily camouflaged. The Residents were Dadaistic dismissal of an entire... they were the weirdest rock band in the world at that time. One of their records is called Meet the Residents. The other one was called Third Reich and Roll. And the third one was called Not Available. And no, it's not available. That kind of thing. Now, we're in the 90s. By the way, have you noticed how time's been compressing? 60s took about 15 years. 70s took about 8. The 80s are already gone. See? And now we're in the 90s. It's just going, year 2000 will arrive tomorrow, probably. But anyway. Let me give you some quickies on this, and then we got to quit. How many, at that time? Are we counting? Anybody counting? 15 minutes. Oh, glory. Shall we have a word for the 1990s? Let's call it the nervous 90s. Now, some of the music you see today, and again I'll use music because it is the best reflector of the culture that we have. Here's the thing. Look at the fringes, not mainstream, but fringes, right? The outside edges of music. Jazz, for instance. Jazz, a lot of things happen in jazz that come into mainstream music 15 years later. Salsa, all those kind of things happen in jazz long before it comes into mainstream. Watch the fringes. Sometimes the fringe will only last like a day or something. But oftentimes the fringe is a prophecy of the next central wave of where music is. If we looked at some of the songs of the 80s were kind of still the optimism of the 70s. You know, Phil Collins, Men at Work, Cyndi Lauper, like Girls Just Want to Have Fun, you know, that kind of thing. And Madonna, singing like a virgin because she wasn't. And then having to sing Papa Don't Preach afterwards for the consequences of not being a virgin. But anyway, a great deal of what I see coming now is a, let's call it anti-hero. The anti-hero, Phantom of the Opera type stuff. They've taken laugh tracks off a lot of the comic shows, see? Rock has entered the dark side of the moon, and Pink Floyd is touring again, which is one of the best descriptions of what is happening in the 90s. There is still a lot of people in the country that are optimistic, but I think the prevailing mood of the country is moving into the following description. Pessimism, depression, bleakness, misery, moroseness. Depeche Mode, for instance, was a group that college students, only people listen now, teeny boppers, 15-year-olds, 12, 13, 14-year-olds screaming and yelling at a Depeche Mode concert. See, let's call it glum rock. And if you look at the extremes, and we'll bring maybe some album covers to show you, look at the extremes, you see a lot of darkness there. In the spiritual world, there's a great hunger for the spiritual now. Major themes. The number one problem in high schools now is not drugs, it is not AIDS, it is Satanism. Number one problem in high school. It's major, it's not spoken about a lot in the news and things, but there are whole police squads that are having to have training now in spiritual warfare to deal with what's out there. We're talking 12-year-olds who are Satanists, practicing, I'll say, intelligently committed Satanists, sending out notes now to speakers. We are children of the beast, things like that. And I'll bring it, when you look at the edges and the fringes, this will not be played probably on your Texas A&M, hey, come into your life. It won't be that. You'll probably find it on the extremes. The extremes are signaling what is coming into the center. And what we've got now is a great period of reevaluation. I'll tell you what's interesting, though. The 70s or the 80s optimism, it was, hey, we can do it. Ooh, just say no and other things. That thing. When people are like that, they don't think a lot. You know what the major answer kids have had to the problems of the world? 1999. See? Whoops, party over, out of time. So I'll party till it's over. The basic answer kids have had for all of the pressures of the world is don't think about it. Get down, man. That's it. Don't think about it. Look at the party animal thing. I've got a Spuds McKenzie. Have you seen? Let's see if I can find my... Here's my party animal T-shirt. This is what happens to Spuds after your basic party. Isn't this a gross T-shirt? Kids love these T-shirts. They like anything gross. See? You know what it is? This is Spuds the Wonder Dog, who is not a man, but a girl dog, actually, who is a party animal. See, and they have T-shirts that look just like this, called I'm a Party Animal. This is a biblical version. As the dog returns to his vomit, so the fool returns to his folly. That's what the party's going to look like in the 1990s. They're out of optimism. There are no answers out there. And it is scary, scary, scary. But here's a cool thing. When the optimism goes out of a culture, people start thinking again. Okay? And that's what we're going to have. In metal, for instance, in different forms of metal music, we got speed metal groups, just how fast can you play without your fingers falling off? Like this. But most, those of you who've never seen a heavy metal concert, people look like they're parachuted in from, they hold their guitars like machines, like this, see? And it's not your basic wimpy sharing music. Heavy metal is not sort of like, I'd like to share a few thoughts with you. It's, it's stomp and scream and kick amplifiers over and vomit on people and do whatever you can to get, see, bang, your head is not mild sharing music. And it is violence. And I think a lot of violence is in the sense of injustice put to music, see? Things are wrong, I don't know what to do. So you don't share with things like that. But with Megadeth and Metallica and groups like that, the move has been now to black metal and glum metal, which is just to exalt the evil and the ugliness and the destruction, to glorify, and that's the children of the beast theme. Glory in destruction. It goes like this. It is hopeless. There is absolutely no answer. There is no hope. We may as well get used to parting with the devil. Okay? And that's there. That's what's coming. So you've really got an interesting culture in the styles of clothes. See, a few years ago, people dressed optimistically. Women went around looking like vegetables, for crying out loud. They had dressed like carrots and these weird things. Now the styles have got very gloomy. You know, I'm trying to find bright colors. The only colors that are bright on the stylish racks are garish colors. They're shock colors. They're not bright colors. They're sort of like garish green as a major one, sort of that throw-up type green, you know. It's colorful, but not colorful. It's colorful. Now, why are we giving you this? People say, oh, this is escapism, but I don't think it is. What it is, it's a massive reaction to kids who've already inherited 3 decades of stuff and are now trying to live. Why are kids like this today? What would you do if your father was a hippie? How would you rebel if your dad was a hippie? Have you ever thought about that? How would you rebel against your father if he was a hippie? I mean, he'd done everything there was to do, right? He'd take drugs. Hey, he tried everything, which is, see? Sex, he experimented with every kind of sex. Well, what did you do? Only 2 things your dad were not into. He was into peace and beauty, see? Okay? So you get into violence and ugliness. Or become a materialist. Become a valley boy or something. See, that would shock you, Father, if you bought a Beamer and got a hot tub and went out to make $1 million. Or you could dye your hair radiation purple and look like you were standing there at the ground zero when the bomb went off. Instead of driving a Beamer, you could drive bits of other people's cars assembled. Instead of wearing the alligator on your teeth, you wear a piece of liver hung off your cheek, preferably there for a year or so. What are the 3 great needs of our time? Some way to channel a sense of militancy. Some way to get a sense of purpose and value and direction we call destiny. And number 1, some way to belong to something we call family. Whatever movement, whether it be Christian or not, that puts those 3 things together will own the 1990s. Militancy, family, and destiny. At about this point in history, a man arose many years ago who actually wrote a book called My Destiny. He found a way to mobilize a nation and to give them a sense of togetherness. His name was Adolf Schicklgruber. He changed it to Hitler. And he put together a work that very nearly took over the world. We enter that same period. That's why the Nazi things are coming back, and the boots and the goose stepping, and see it in the music, you see everything else. There's a hunger right now for those things. But there is one work in the universe that can fulfill those needs better than anybody else I know. It is called the Church of Jesus Christ. It's going to be a fun time coming up. Let's close in prayer. Time's gone. That has been your quick tour of the last 3 decades. Father, we thank you again for your love, your goodness, your mercy. We ask for wisdom as to how we should look at and face and deal with in this decade to come. In the name of Jesus. Amen. Okay. Good night. Sleep well. We are going to look, first of all, we'll call this, and I have to do this in a very fast way. Some of you may have heard this kind of material before, but I'm going to have to go through this again. We're going to look at what makes this generation different from any other generation of kids in the past. Now, I want to read you a quote first. Remember years ago, Bobby Dylan stood up and said something like this: "Come, mothers and fathers throughout the land, don't criticize what you can't understand. Remember that your sons and your daughters are beyond your command. Your old road is rapidly aging. Please get out on a new one if you can't lend a hand, because the times, they are a-changing." And that time, that shift, has taken place and come into fruition in our day. I'm going to read you a quote. This is called "Why Are Kids Worse Today?" All right? Now, you tell me if you think this is an accurate description of a lot of kids today. "There is little doubt that the present generation of college young men and women is in serious moral difficulty," this writer writes. "Compared with generations preceding, they have shunned discipline and a willingness to excel in their studies. Many give little or no thought to the serious issues of life. Common decency and modesty and manners and dress apparently are things of the past. The fact that evil is called good while good is called evil, I'm bad. He didn't say that, but somebody else did. Seems to be of small concern to them. Student groups indulge in wild orgies of self-gratification, while co-eds dress and walk in a manner deliberately intended to arouse sexual desire. Both young men and women in their actions and conversations make sexual overtures in the most shameless fashion." Does that sound like a pretty fair description of kids today? That was written by a man called Aristophanes 500 years before Christ. Here's another one. "Our youth today love luxury," this philosopher comments. "They have bad manners, contempt for authority, and disrespect for older people. Children today are tyrants. They no longer rise when their elders enter the room. They contradict their parents, chatter before visitors, gobble their food, and tyrannize their teachers." That was written by Socrates, also in the 5th century before Christ. So let's put this down. Are kids worse today? No, they are not. They're just as bad. But they're not worse. Matter of fact, being a kid, and all of us have been kids at one time, means that you have problems that are common to all kids. And what we're going to look at in our first session together is what makes this particular generation of young people, by generation I mean 25-year span is basically a biblical generation. What makes this generation of the young different from any other kids in history? First of all, I have to give you the statement that parents use. This is the single statement most calculated to turn off a kid from their parents. All right? Every parent has used it. And here is the statement: "When I was your age..." And it's usually followed by, "I had to walk through the snow in my bare feet for 14 miles to get to school and pay the teachers to educate me," stuff like that. But anyway, here's something for you if you ever get to be a parent. That is not true. Parents, especially parents, we could say more particularly grandparents, never were the age of these kids. These are unique pressures. These are things that have never happened, we're going to give you this morning, have never happened to any generation of children in any time. The first one, and the one we want to focus on, is that this is the first generation growing up with total media exposure. That has just plain never happened before. When we say total media exposure, we mean that it is now possible, as a technological revolution, of course, it is now possible for young people to be put instantly in contact with any other place in the world, to see in living color that which is happening only a few seconds before on the other side of the world. With satellite linkage, in the old days, for instance, say there was a major war. You might hear about it by a runner who collapses in your door, having run for 6 months around the world. By that time, the war is probably over, but he's getting the news. A war has just broken out in Polypolesia or wherever. Now you can see that war. If a plane crashes in Thailand, boom, it's on the morning news. It's just there. And what we're looking at is not the content of what is being said, though that in itself we could ask a lot of questions on. I'm not saying what this media is saying to kids. We're looking at the media itself. And we are going to particularly focus on television, because television is a new medium. When you think about it, before 1950, there really was no television. So in the lifetime of many people on this ranch, television was invented and brought in. It's a brand new medium. We have not really paid a lot of attention until the last decade of the effects of television on kids. So what I want to do is show you what particular pressures young people are faced with because of television. And now, again, we're not talking about what television's saying. Everybody goes, you know, there's a lot of demonic things on television. So give you bangy look, there's a lot of bad stuff. I'm not talking about what's on television. I'm talking about the medium itself. We've got, when we look at TV, three very important techniques that have developed. First of all, television has taught kids to love and to live in the in-depth experience. So we'll call this, the way kids learn today, the primary way young people learn today, is not the way kids have learned for the last 300 or 400 years. The primary way kids learn today is not by books. Now, in the old days, see, Gutenberg, remember, he invented the printing press. Up to that, if you wanted a book, you had to handwrite it. So a bestseller was like 40 copies. When Gutenberg developed the printing press and the first Bibles were printed, made the Reformation possible, it really trained generation after generation on what we call print technology. And the way that you learn in print is simple. So you start at the top and you work down, unless you're Hebrew and you work from this side. See that? I don't know, very many people go this way, but see, the Chinese, of course, they read up and down like that, see, which makes them much more godly. When they read the Bible, they're always going, yeah. We're going, no way, no way. Yeah. Anyway, this linear thinking actually affects communications theorists say that we have really two ways of processing data. They call it left brain, right brain activity. One side of your brain sort of deals more with the artistic, the inductive, the picture type stuff. The other side of your brain deals with maths and point 1, point 2, point 3 things. Now, what has happened is that this reading stuff and learning stuff from books has highly developed us in that point 1, point 2, point 3 thing. But what it has not focused on until very recently is that other whole side of the brain. So what we're seeing now is a communications revolution that shifted away from the print kind of thinking to the other kind of thinking, which is picture thinking, okay? Television has been a major contributor to this. Now, let me show you some things. We'll give you some fun little things you can do yourself. What is this in-depth experience? We'll call it sampling. Television, you know, is really, can you write this word down? Remember this word? The word is inductive. As distinct from deductive. It's got nothing to do with Howard deduct. Thought I'd throw that in. What you're looking at when you're looking at a television picture, and I've got a little thing here if I can find it for you. See if I can find it. Let's see, it's not in there. It's probably not in here. Here it is. What you're looking at in television is a still picture or a shot that is changing 50 times a second. So within 1 second, you're watching 50 different changes. The average person sees 795,000 pictures a day, television. These are constantly shifting images. And what kind of image is a television picture? It is, the more exciting it is, the less boring bits are cut out. For instance, here is the way old television used to work. A person would get up and they would go, like Dragnet, for instance. We need to find out the answer to this. It's probably on the street. Okay, let's go to the street. Camera follows them. They go to the street. They go down the, they head out to the street. It reaches them down on the street, and they go, here we are on the street. Now, let's look. Now, today, what they do is they cut out all the boring stuff in between. So they go, perhaps it's in Afghanistan. And the next frame, they're in Afghanistan. What happened to all this stuff in between? They cut it out. The way kids learn today is like this. Snitches and snatches. It's sample. People get their news like that. See, it's not, television doesn't make for discussion. You understand that? Television makes for one-liners. You know, people sitting down having deep, detailed discussion, people leave during that. So it's all this one shot. You can really see this in commercials. And I'll show you how to analyze a commercial in a little while. But the more people have worked on this, the faster things have sped up. So what we got now is a hot commercial, say a 30-second Coke or a Pepsi commercial where they're going to spend $500,000 for 60 seconds or 30 seconds. You're going to compress into one picture a vast amount of constantly shifting stuff because, you see, it is boring if you put all the bits in between. Basically, we've got a can of fizzy water. That has to be sold. Okay, so what you do is put all this exciting stuff. Here's what I want you to do. When you look at a commercial, don't look at the local one by, come down, buy our Chevrolets, we got some great deals here. Not that one, not those commercials. Look at one of these hot, major commercials, and here's what I want you to do. Every time the picture changes on the screen, reset a clock. Here's the way you do it. Here's an audible clock. Look at your watch if you got one and go like this. 1 higgledy-piggledy, 2 higgledy-piggledy, 3 higgledy-piggledy, 4. That's about higgledy-piggledy, 1 higgledy-piggledy. It's about a second. You see that? See? 1 higgledy-piggledy, 2 higgledy-piggledy, right? The reason I'm giving you this is because it's really hard to look at a watch and look at the screen at the same time. So you can say this out aloud. 1 higgledy-piggledy. Every time you see a change on the screen, reset your audible clock. If a thing stays up for 3 seconds, it'll be 1 higgledy-piggledy, 2 higgledy-piggledy, 3 higgledy... Oh, okay, see? Okay, now here's what you find. All the boring commercials, there's one guy up there for 60 higgledy-piggledy, 70 higgledy-piggledy. That. The hot commercials, no image stays on that screen for more than a second. You'll see one, like that. And they think that by the 1990s, which have already arrived, we will have blipverts, which is all of the data in a 30-second or a 60-second commercial compressed into, say, 9 seconds. You'll just get it like that. And here's what's wild. The people who watch those will be able to see every image in those commercials. I'll show you the difference between one generation and another. Take a wise, articulate, talented, dexterous adult and take a 9-year-old boy and give them both a video game that neither have seen before. And you tell me who will beat the cheese out of the other one in about 15 minutes max. Why is that? Because kids actually see more on screens visually than their parents do. There have been tests, for instance. You ever see the Brady Bunch? I'm not talking about the content of the show. Who cares if you ever see the content of the show? But the opening of it has the screen divided up into a whole bunch of frames, okay? And there's a different person in each frame. Well, they did this some years ago. These are for very small people, these bottom ones. They did is they had different images in each one of these frames, each one talking, or, doing something, smiling or something. And they had a large version of this, say with about 30 different images on the screen, and they gave adults and children 60 seconds to look at the screen with all these images, and then to write down what they could remember. Well, in set things, like in memory tests, where there is a fixed picture or fixed objects, adults do pretty well. And let's say there were 30. I don't know, I've forgotten what the number they had. Say they had 30 items there. 60 seconds to look at it, and then you had to write down what you could remember. Adults did pretty well. You know, they got 12, sometimes 15. Kids got 24, 28, stuff like that. There really is a difference. They are visually more sophisticated than any other generation that has ever lived. Now, write that down and think about it. Kids are visually more sophisticated than any generation of young people who have ever lived, which means they see more, they think more in pictures, and their whole life is very sophisticated visually. That's why they're so conscious of things like fashion and movement and stuff like that. They are very, very fast. That's why the Army and the military are using video games to train kids for real fighters. You play Top Gun on a video game, it's only a brief step from there to play Top Gun on a real Top Gun. And they're finding kids, this is the premise of The Last Starfighter, who are so fast in their hand-eye coordination that what they're going to do is put the real weaponry set up just like a video game. So you sit in your little thing with the moving, got one, got 15, and you're getting real 15. The new helmets that look like Darth Vader have all of the data, and just by turning and by looking, you do this, and it gives you a side picture immediately in the front. You do this, and it gives you the picture behind. You blink your eyes, and it sets your thing. You cough, so you better not sneeze. And they steals. All right? Now, I give you this to explain something. Here is a pastor, we'll call him Pastor Disaster for short, who is a good man. He has prayed and fasted and he loves God, but he has not understood this major shift that has taken place. So what he is going to do, however, is before the adult message, he is going to give his 20, 30-minute Sunday school talk to the children. So he said, all right, this morning, children, we're going to have our Sunday school talk. So he's sitting in front of them, the most visually sophisticated 8 and 9-year-olds that have ever lived. Okay? Now, the pastor doesn't understand what's happening here, but he's going to get up, and what he's going to do is he's going to, first of all, he's going to tell the story he's going to tell. Remember, these kids have watched thousands of stories. They've watched in comics, they've watched them in cartoons, they've watched, and they know a lot about stories. So the pastor begins, he gets about 2.5 minutes into his message, and the kids are looking at each other like, oh yeah, I know. Huh, yeah. They've probably figured out what this story is 2.3 minutes into the message. Well, pastor grinds on, he finishes it, see? Okay, kids all look at each other. Then he explains it. It gets worse. Well, now the kids are going, oh. See, they already understand what, it's a good story, then it already explains itself. You have to explain it, it's an awful story. He explains it nevertheless. It gets worse. Then he applies it. And what does this mean to you and I, children? And by now the kids are looking out into space, they're tying each other's pigtails and throwing paper darts at each other. Here's something. Don't explain it. Don't do it. Well, what if he doesn't understand? Too bad. Keep going. There's a lot of stuff kids don't understand. That's part of the mystery of life. It's a good story, it stands on its own. Don't explain, just and go on. You'll see some kids going, what did you say? What do you mean? What do you think? It's all right. They can ask afterwards. You didn't get it? Wow, you're stupid. Now, I've got to give you these other two things, and then we'll come back. People like George Lucas and Steven Spielberg have mastered this art of what we could call MTV editing. You know that MTV really saved the record industry. Some years ago, record sales were just so bad that companies were thinking of going out of business. And then a marketing genius came up with the idea of putting music to pictures. And it was that link that saved the record industry. Now MTV feeds the record industry. Actually, here is a musician who came up with the idea about 4 years before that. His name was Todd Rundgren, and he said it'd be great to put pictures to this thing, to do it in video. He's sort of a one-man studio, and he plays synthesizer, guitar, bass, drums, and it sings, does the whole thing. And at least 3 or 4 years before MTV was launched, he mentioned that should be done. Now, what we're seeing now is that this editing technique, what you do in MTV is you cut out, again, all the boring bits. You keep everything fast-moving and mysterious, okay? You watch, wow, what is that? I don't know. Who is that? Who is that? What are you singing about? See that? You keep them thinking all the time. Now, men like Lucas and Spielberg have learned to chop out every boring thing so that when you watch something like, when Star Wars first came on, it was a total blockbuster. It's still the #1 best-selling movie of all time. Star Wars. When it came on, you're sitting there in a theater and you hear, and there's all this sound around you, and then you see this thing go past you, and oh, and then the big thing that chased it, you went, oh, and afterwards, and it blew everybody away. One kid sitting in the theater watched Star Wars 237 times in a row. He'd get up, pay his money, stay in the theater all day. Early in the morning, first show, there he was again. Eventually, they noticed him and set up a date with Princess Leia with him. But Carrie Fisher, he didn't want a date with Carrie Fisher. It was a much more fun world inside that thing. Now, what is the power of something like an Indiana Jones and Raiders of the Lost Ark, or well, for instance, if you watched in Empire Strikes Back, there's a chase through a forest, Forest of Endor, where everybody's riding on. It is really interesting to watch a granddad and his grandson together watching a movie like that. I like watching audiences, they're watching like this. Here is, in this high-speed chase, like the the kid is seeing everything. Oh, wow, see that head blow right up? Oh, look at that, see? You look at his granddad, he's in shock. What is happening? Kids have learned to follow things really fast. So what the film editors are doing are deliberately experimenting to see just how fast they can throw action up on a screen and you still consciously perceive it. The last half hour of Star Wars has more editing in it than a major 2.5-hour motion picture. And if you watch it on video anytime, you'll see the MTV editing that is used. And they'll go, I'm going over it. You can't stop that. We can't. That's what hurt. Like that. Constant cut, 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 cut. Go with your one higgly-piggly. For a whole half an hour, you'll be going, one, ooh, one, ooh, one, two, see? And what these things do is they lock you in, force you to stay interested, right through to the end. Okay? Now, stop thinking in terms of preaching the gospel. Okay? When we're looking at this thing, start thinking in terms of lost audience. Why is it that these people are looking into the ceiling and are gone? Why is that? Is it because the pastor has not prayed and fasted enough? No. There is a different kind of audience in front of him than the one that grew up reading books. Different. Okay? Now, let's give you these other quick two, and then we'll come back and show you some things need to be done. The artificial interest thing, they sustain artificial interest by putting all kinds of different exciting stuff. So we could put, you see, basically, go back to a can of fizzy water. Fizzy water is boring stuff when you think about it. Just you open it, that's it. You've got all kinds of stuff in there that'll kill you. Antifreeze, and they put all kinds of interesting stuff in these things. To maintain interest in a commercial, they will shoot things from all kinds of different interesting angles. Good film directors will. You ever think, where's the camera in this thing? It's really interesting. Because sometimes the camera sort of looks like it's hanging out in space. It drops, comes around, goes down on the floor, and you're thinking, boy, how do they shoot that thing? They're forcing you to stay interested by giving unusual angles. You know that when you take when you take a photo of your friends and everybody's standing, like this, and they're this high, because you had to get everybody in, that thing. And you wonder why your pictures don't look as good as others. Well, you got your other photographers who are doing this, kind of shots like this. In television, they do this. The frames are shot in all unusual action, and they have a helicopter shot from the next one, sort of from the ground, looking up your nose hairs, and they keep the interest by changing angles. Now, let's go back to our pastor. Where is the pastor speaking when he's giving this morning message to children? Not where I am here, but in a pulpit about 100 miles away from the closest person. He is way, way up there, and not only that, the pulpit is 50 feet above contradiction. Very, very high pulpit, see? And it is massive. See? It just has this large thing there. And what it says is, I am guru. You are devotee. See? What must you do to lessen that communication gap between you and your audience? Get as close as you can to them. That's why we throw out pulpits and put these things in. If possible, not be on a platform if you're in a church. Get as close to your audience. That's why street theater works so well. The difference between this, for instance, preaching, kids think in terms of, this is a preacher, see? But if you have a musician, watch the difference in the kids, right? Here's a stage, here's kids, see? Speaker, kids here. Musician. Kids climbing up on stage. See, what is the difference here? See, music and drama is involvement stuff. It gets people into the story. Speaking has normally been, I want to share with you 7 points. So keep your interest. There was a very effective church preacher called Fred Price. I don't know if you ever watched Fred. Fred's a black preacher in L.A. I watched him a few times on television, and I've come to this conclusion. I don't know why he has a pulpit in his church. He never uses it. And every time I've ever seen him, he is there with his audience, and the pulpit is way back there as part of the decoration, I think, sort of backdrop. But what Fred is doing, he's wandering up and down Mary, hey, Joe, and he's doing stuff like this. He is with his audience. Difference is this. Speakers talk to an audience. What we're looking for is people who will put their audience in their message. Now, in the old days, we need to think of the history of this thing. Why did people put a pulpit up like that? What was it there for? Why was it so high? For sound. They had no PA system. Now, you get guys like George Whitefield, who on a clear day that was rumored you could hear him from 5 miles away. He hardly needed a thing. But most normal people had to get up real high. They put a board sometimes behind them to help reflect the voices out. So you had to get up there like this with the audience out there in a place where everybody could see. And I've preached in a church over 300 years old. The pulpit was 1.5 stories high. It was this small. The church was held up by these huge pillars, but this was the only place in the entire church you could perfectly see and hear the person in that thing. If you moved just 2 feet to the whole column would cut you out. See, it was precisely designed. And we don't need that anymore. We got this. We got PA systems. We got all kinds of stuff. So now you can talk to one person like you can talk to 40,000. You could do this, talk here, have something thrown up in a video screen 100 foot high, and just talk to 40,000 people like you talk to one. But what if you didn't know that? What if you, based on 200 years ago, stood again in the place where people did 200 years ago, and shouted at the top of your voice so people could hear you, with a PA system and with a television, which is exactly what a huge chunk of pastors is still doing. I want you to know. Now, what happens, because we're now a high-tech church, we bought some video cameras. The sound system is killing people. They're going, ah, ah, ah. They keep moving back further. The pastor turns the volume down. Kind of a competition, you know. Anyway, as he's shouting, of course, these good video cameras are equipped with zoom lenses. The zoom lens does is it brings the person that close, right? See? But the pastor is still shouting, see? Hey! What? No! And the person, then he wonders why nobody watches his TV program. Because who likes to be shouted at from 3 inches away? Billy Graham did an interesting thing. Wally Duguid, who lives in this area, is a sound engineer for Billy. Some years ago, Billy did a crusade, and they normally just tape the crusades, you know, with persons speaking. And this particular thing, they had an embarrassing thing happen. Though they got all of Billy's stuff, they found out that about half an hour of the crusade was lost because a camera hadn't been loaded properly, see? So here they are, they got a TV special to come, and they've got half an hour of light. You can't put George Bev Shea on singing for half an hour. So when they found this out, which was straight after the thing closed, Billy came back into this empty, huge arena. With some papers blowing in the wind, it was dark, had his overcoat on. And he said, as you can see, the crusade is over and everybody's gone home. But I've come back to talk to you. And for half an hour, Billy Graham talked to one person, and they said it was one of the most effective things we have ever done. See, television is one-on-one. That's what a talk show is. It is not yelling and screaming unless it's the Morton Downey Jr. show, which is called high audience involvement, right? Ah, you get that! You know, that thing, see? It's called artificial interest, too. Number 3, the short transit time. Now, I've already looked at this thing with your timing deal. But with everything made more exciting by cutting out the boring bits, let me ask you a question. What view do kids have of the world? Television's full of all this artificial excitement and interest. See, all the boring bits cut out. I believe the answer is Israel. In Israel, boom, you hear the sound of the jet. Right there as they're sitting in the living room, you hear the sound of a 747. TV people go, oh, of course. The next frame, they'll be in a jet. Sure enough, next frame, they're in a jet flying to Israel. What happened to the 2 weeks between? What happened to all the packing you have to do? And the getting a visa and all that stuff? What happened to all of that stuff? Well, they cut it out. It was boring. In real life, the next frame is not in Israel. They actually get hijacked and you wind up in Cuba or something. You never get to Israel. You stay in a concentration camp for 5 years. But that's exciting. You cut to that quickly. But now, take average kid's life who's learning about more from pictures than anything else, learning about what life is like. Here is the number 1 statement kids make today. Boring. It's boring. Why don't you go, boring. Boring. Why? Because their picture of life is given from this. They actually learn more from television than any other single thing. As of 3 years ago, TV watching in America became the single greatest block of time that everybody does more than anything else, apart from sleeping. And even then, it's pretty close. So more than working, more than anything else, people are watching TV. Now, that is a major, major training shift. So let's put this one beside it. You ever notice how impatient kids are? Come, hurry up. You see something? Can I have that? It might be in a year. A year? Why not now? Well, we can't afford it. I'll sell everything and I'll buy it. See, they don't want it. There's no idea of putting it off. Like, why can't I get married? Well, you're only 14 years old. Well, I love you. Why can't I, see? I don't want to be a teenage spinster. Everything in television is solved in an hour. Boy meets girl, girl hates boy, crook kidnaps girl, boy rescues girl, girl still hates boy, girl now likes crook. All of these things must be solved in a single hour with pause for commercials. Real life things don't happen like that. It takes a long time sometimes to get things done. Even in the Bible, you're witnessing an edited commercial form of recorded history. In Acts, for instance, they cut out a lot of the stuff. It just says church spread and grew everywhere. It doesn't say, now Julius Prattney, he went down and married Juliana Prattney, and they lived for a long time. And it cuts all that out. It goes, there's a great miracle here, there was this. And you see it in like 3 or 4 chapters. It's all compressed. Can you tell me the effects of this lot of pictures, little words, fast-changing things in other media? Can you tell me, for instance, we see it in concerts. That's obvious. You know, you have a show in a concert. Nobody comes out and sings anymore. You've got to have lasers and smoke, and people got to fly around, and, you know, all kinds of stuff. You can't just watch it. That's why Michael Jackson shows are always so entertaining, because he's a master of the fantasy world. He creates these, people go, oh, isn't that awesome? I mean, who cares if he sings or not? It just looks great. See that? Kiss, for instance. So I think with their makeup off, they look worse. They should have kept the makeup on. But a guy like Gene Simmons, when they put a show together, they didn't want people to go, wow, it was a great show. They want to go, these guys are gods, man. This is totally out of this world. It makes you feel like an ozone warrior just watching. Now, what about magazines, for instance? How have magazines, newspapers, can you give me an example of a newspaper that has been deeply affected by MTV, that as of now is the #1 best-selling newspaper in America? That should give you a clue. Yeah, USA Today. Only the Wall Street Journal, which is a kind of a financial thing that everybody reads. USA Today, USA Today is the most popular newspaper. And have you noticed how local newspapers are changing their format? Have you ever picked up USA Today? And I heard a guy say, I will give you a couple of bucks if you can find one single opening sentence on any USA Today thing that has more than 15 words in it. See all the pictures? What about people? And see the pictures? Tons of pictures. Bleep, bleep. Little bit of stuff. Then big picture, then little bit of stuff. See? Why? Why do people do that? Because it's more visual today. Now I'm going to ask you a question. How, in the light of this, can you modify speaking? All of us are going to have to speak something. Some of you are going to be doing drama, street theater. Some of you will be singing. Some of you will be miming. Some of you will be dancing. Some of you will be doing puppets. You'll be doing all kinds of stuff. In the light of what we've given you here, what changes must you make in what you do when you actually are talking to people? Okay? This thing here means, because they're a sampling thing, then what you do is you give your stuff in samples. Okay? Practice one-liners. You know what a one-liner is? It's a statement that sums up maybe an awful lot of thought to get that one-liner. Matter of fact, here's the thing. Your opening 30 seconds is when kids are going to decide whether you're worth listening to or not. Those opening 30 seconds is going to make or break it. Now, we're not doing in these classrooms what, obviously, because it's more a teaching thing and rather than a reaching thing. You understand that in actual preaching type situations where you're trying to get an unsaved audience to stay, your opening 30 seconds is probably the most important thing of all. Just like flipping a channel. Bleep. You see something. Am I going to watch it or not? It's boring. Somebody's talking. Bleep. And you're gone. What is a one-liner? One-liner is when you think a lot about something and then you're able to compress it down into one little single statement. All great street preachers have one-liners. You learn that. You know, develop some. I was in Australia at the start of this year. We had had the largest turnout of any Christian thing in the history of that city. It was kids came out of the woodwork. All churches cooperated. We had a lot of kids come to this thing. We had to move it to the dog track to hold the crowds of people that were there. It was good. That mayor and all the other people came out from the city and stuff. So in the middle of it, ABC, Australian Broadcasting, which is secular television, no real Christian television over there, apart from a few little inserts into things, sticks this ice cream under my nose and says, "You think this is a bit unusual with all these young people coming out for a religious gathering?" See, now, what are you going to do? You're going to sit and go, "Well, actually, let me give you a little of the philosophy or the background." See, they don't care. People are going to be watching for maybe 5 seconds. They're going to decide whether or not they're going to listen or not. Television's always like that, little bits. I said, actually, this isn't a religious gathering. Christian. And this is unusual only here in our backslidden West. In the rest of the world, all kinds of fun things are happening like this. And then he said, "Well, what do you think of naming certain famous television evangelists who just blown it in America?" Now what are you going to do? "Well, let me share with you the Christian principles." I said, "It's about time you guys in the media said that immorality was wrong. You never said it before." Okay? Now that's a two-liner. But understand that, see, what are we looking at behind that? I didn't just come out of heaven. I sat down and thought for a long time what the implications of the media getting on the case of Christians who blew it were. And one of the major ones is the media are hypocritical. They own morality, especially men in key leadership places, is atrocious. And Christian bashing has become a very significant thing. If you did it with Jewish people or black people or gays, you'd be in serious trouble in this country. But Christian bashing has become a popular sport. So what you do is you think very hard about what is the implication of this statement. And if you can write it out in a single sentence, you understand it. If you can't, you probably don't, which is a great test for a message. Can you write what you want to say in a one-liner? If not, you're probably either trying to say too much or you still don't know what you're talking about. You ever heard this? Kids say, "What was the meeting?" "Oh, it was wonderful." "What did he say?" "I don't know." I have no idea at all what you're talking about. It was profound, though. This artificial interest, what are you going to do with that? How are you going to maintain an MTV generation of people? Shoot silly string at them. That is the first thing. Everybody buy a can of silly string. No, do whatever you can to involve them. That's why I like these kind of things and not, this thing here, mic that sticks up over here that they force you to use, standing in this pulpit 400 feet wide. How can you do anything? Your face is going to be locked in like that for an hour. So disconnect from that thing. Get away if you can. See, I have fun. I go out. I get people in the back. See, I have all kinds of fun. I just give them a hard time, get the backsliders. I even leave. I walk out. Goodbye. And with the mic, see, with a radio mic, too, or a long, long cord, they can still hear you. You can be talking outside. "Hey, it's nice out here, See, keep the interest by keeping moving all the time. Keep shifting. Don't get them guessing where you're going to come from. Ah! See, don't be afraid, by the way, to be childlike. Let me give you some comments. See, some of you think, well, this is not very Christian. I don't know. Now, I don't usually do this with a group of Wall Street businessmen, okay? We're talking about kids who are deeply, deeply affected by television. The more of a youth-type audience you have, and adults don't mind. You know, if kids are having fun, the adults will put up with it. But you must maintain. Remember, you're an audience that is very easily bored, so keep shifting what you're talking about. Don't stay. Let me diagram it for you. Here is the old way of speaking. You know, point one, there are many paths in life. We have a lot of different paths in life, don't we? Point two, which path are you on? Point three, it is probably the wrong one. Point four, the end of that path is not very nice. See? Now, this is sort of teaching. See? It's like fence posts. What you need to do with this is to put a bunch, say the same thing about 14 different ways. Because somebody's not going to get it one way, so say it another way. Say the same thing different ways. Here's what I want you to do. Take messages, spoken messages that you've heard, or that even they're written, as long as they haven't been edited. Take a spoken message and analyze it, and you'll see an interesting thing. If you drew it out, you'll probably find the person will say that same thing 2 or 3 different times in 2 or 3 different ways. And if you wrote it out, it would look like poetry. Would it go like this? Jesus is the way. He is the truth. He is the light. Boom, 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 boom. See? Do that. Bunch of stuff. Hammer. It's like a nail hit. 1, 2, 3. Like that. This constantly shifting will drive people crazy, but kids will like it. And the wonderful thing about kids is that they are able to shift emotionally very fast. They can laugh their heads off 1 second, be crying their eyes out the next, just like this. Here's average kid's life during week. Monday, Tuesday, like that. Keep everything short. By the way, you can speak for a long time to kids if everything is short within it. Your pastors say, young people won't listen for more than 15 minutes. Not on one thing they will. They won't listen more than 30 seconds on one thing. But if you keep shifting it all the time, keep moving, keep your illustrations moving, leave things unexplained sometimes. Jesus didn't always tell a story and then say, now let me explain this story. He just, look at Revelation. Did he explain that? I wish Spielberg would do Revelation just as it is. That would freak people completely out of their heads. The Book of Revelation. Special effects by Industrial Light and Magic. All right, how's that time? Are we getting close to 10 minutes? It's amazing. Time flies when you're having fun. Let me then give you a little connection here with what Jesus preached and how he preached. Have you ever wondered how Jesus preached to people? I want to take something which is basically Sermon on the Mount. Okay? Who analyzes, says Greg Lewis from this book, wonderful book, Inductive Preaching, Helping People Listen. Who analyzes Jesus' message, the Sermon on the Mount, as an 18-minute sermon with dozens of examples, visual images, scores of comparisons, and interest-catching devices as diverse as riddles, sex appeal, and everyday experience. Can Jesus teach us anything about preaching? And here is the difference between the deductive thing and the inductive. How many of you have been Christians for more than 5 years? Put your hands up. How many have ever heard of the Sermon on the Mount? Put your hands up. Okay? Wonderful. How many have actually read this sermon? Okay? Now, here's the difference between deductive and inductive. Can you tell me the sixth beatitude? Now, look at the way your minds are going, though. When you think sixth beatitude, it's going, let's see, blessed are the... Point one, point two. See how you're thinking like that? I could have made it harder. I could say, start with the last beatitude, back up to and tell me what it is. Let's see, there's 8 of them. Let's see, 8 the last one. See? Okay, now we'll give you something else. This is inductive. Do you know the story of the prodigal son? Pick it up where he's with the pigs. Give me a flashback on how he got there, and then finish it off. And you can do it easy. See that? You can do it easy. Why? Because you remember stories. Points are hard to remember. So what you should look for, pray for, and keep your eyes open for are good stories. Be a good story collector. There are some people to whom good stories come naturally. Tony Campolo seems to always come up with good stories. He probably invents some of them, but they're wonderful stories. He talked about being in a plane one time, sitting next door to a guy who was smoking a cigar in a non-smoking seat. A cigar. You're not allowed to smoke cigars in planes. So Tony said to him, excuse me, this is non-smoking. Could you put your cigar out? The guy went, blew smoke right in his face. All right, Tony's Italian, you know. He calls over the stewardess. He goes, excuse me. He said, you know, this man is smoking. This is a non-smoking seat, and it's a cigar. Stewardess said, sir, you'll have to put that out. Cigar. We don't allow cigars in airplanes. And it's a non-smoking seat. You know what he did? Blew right in her face. So she looked at Tony like, you know, what can I do? You know, I can't throw him off the plane where it's... So anyway, Tony was just sitting there fuming. He didn't know what to do. And he said, just then, the plane hit a mighty air pocket, just as the stewardess was going past with a tray of drinks. He said, the drinks, he was sitting in the aisle, and this guy was sitting beside him. The drinks went up in the air, missed him completely, and landed all over this guy. Put his cigar out, soaked him, and this gorgeous stewardess fell in my lap. And then he said, and you say there is no God. Now, the deductive method and the inductive method is real different. The inductive, this is the way it works. First, for instance, you ask many questions. Why do you ask questions? It makes people think, and it involves them in the thing. See, for instance, I'll say, now, how many of you, do you see that? And everybody go, see? You say, oh, yes, Simon. And you may not even want an answer. It's a rhetorical question, it can be. How many of you have come here with needs and problems in your life? You know, people go, me, I came here, I brought a problem. You see that? It's not necessarily there. The Sermon on the Mount, in this little short thing, has 19 questions in it. It is loaded up with questions. It's only got 2,320 words, and there are 19 questions in it. There are 348 images or pictures in this thing, different images or pictures. In an 18-minute message, 348 different images or pictures. 221 times, Jesus uses this phrase, you. Now, how many times have you heard this in the fall? There are many people somewhere out here beyond the bounds of our church. See that? Here's what Jesus said. You know, it's me. I mean, you don't mean somebody out there? We often talk like, there are a lot of people, of course, wouldn't be anybody I'm speaking to today, and I don't even know why I'm speaking to you, but there are a lot of people. See, Jesus is personal, direct, you. Now, I want you to see the difference in tenses. In the Sermon on the Mount, have a guess which would be the most well-used tense in the Sermon on the Mount. We've got tenses like past, present, future. Present is the number one tense used. 65% of the Sermon on the Mount is all in the present, right now. Okay? Here's the difference. In this kind of stuff, the audience plays a part of authority. In other words, the audience is going to decide whether or not they want to listen to you. In the other one, you're sort of like the guru. See, like, I'm here because I'm going to share with you something that you ignorant clods do not know. Now, our modern audiences sit there and they go like this, I don't care who this guy is. He can be president, he can be king, he can be famous movie star. I don't know whether I believe him or not. The way they find out that is to match what you're saying with their own present experiences. They go, is that like it is or not? Yeah, that's like it is. All right, I'll listen a bit more. Do you see that? So Jesus uses present all the time. 65%. The next major tense, out of the two we got left, future. You're right, future. Future is used 30%. Because it's mysterious. Jesus is always talking about what is to come. Gives you an idea, this guy knows where he's going. And guess how much of his message is the past? 5%. Just 5. What's the past? Tradition? What has been said before? History a little bit? You have heard it said, Jesus asked, but I say to you. Boom. All right. And having put that together, it gives us a little idea of what we're supposed to be doing in our stuff. These books I do recommend strongly. How to Speak to Youth, Ken Davis, group magazine publication, and it's got a lot of stuff on preparing your message. It shows you how to lay stuff out, think through it so you know what you're talking about. And then this one here is a great analysis of the difference between inductive and deductive and the shift that has taken place because of that. All right, that's part one. And with that, we will take a break. We have been looking at the major differences that have come about because of the changes in perception. We've called these two differences deductive and inductive. Deductive being a way of learning things that is more point 1, point 2, point 3, point 4, involves a lot of logic and facts. Inductive deals more with pictures. It deals with questions and experiences. And what we have said here is that for the first time in a long time, about 500 years, people have begun to move away from the way they used to learn stuff with print back to an old way of learning things. And that way is and involves these kind of things. Let's put them up here. We'll call it, it involves storytelling. It involves music and song. It involves dance. It involves drama. It involves group interaction and participation. Now, what we're talking about, is this stuff new stuff? Is this all new? It was only invented since television? No, it's not. It's been around since the dawn of time. Now, I'm Maori by my background. Our Maori people in New Zealand, we didn't have a bunch of books that the Tohunga printed up. What we had is we had dance, we had music. You learn stuff about your country and you learn stuff about your tribe by watching somebody do something. See, you watched it. It's called modeling, which is another part of this whole inductive process. By drama, you acted out something. By talking close in groups and all that. What we're saying is that for 500 years of print, we have learned primarily this way and also studied that way. Now we're going back to learning this way and hopefully studying that way. Okay. Let's look at a little bit of history. I mentioned to you George Whitefield. When George Whitefield was 21 years old, he had 50,000 people coming out in the snow to hear him speak at 6 in the morning. Okay? No microphone. Just George Whitefield. Let me ask you a question. What do you think George Whitefield's sermons were like? If you pick up one of them printed, and I've got some of them, you'll be absolutely disappointed. You'll wonder, what in the fat did anybody ever listen to this for? Because somebody asked George Whitefield when he was alive, can we reprint your sermons? You know what he said? Yes, if you include the fire and the lightning. Now, most of George's written stuff is actually very poor. In other words, if you look at it like this, you think, well, you know, he said a few good things, but when George Whitefield actually preached, he was a totally dramatic preacher. You see, he grew up in a pub, in a bar. His dad died, his mother remarried. The guy that she married ran a bar. So George Whitefield's childhood was spent among hookers and pimps and highway robbers. Those were his friends and the people he grew up with. He was also a great mimic, and his favorite trick was to take off on preachers. He was a Flip Wilson. He had all of these minister imitations he used to do. Then he got saved. So what he was then was this incredibly dramatic guy. If you can imagine either a Bill Cosby or an Eddie Murphy saved in England, then you got an idea what George Whitefield was like. But he was dramatic. He was so powerfully dramatic that not only did ordinary people come out to hear him, children and everything, also the great literary figures of his time came out just to listen. He came to America a couple of times. People like Benjamin Franklin and others just crowded in to hear him. He was just so astonishingly good. He was a dramatic person. As a matter of fact, he was telling a story one time, and one of the number one literary figures of his time, Lord Chesterfield, sitting on a horse with his friend, all these society people out on the fringes of the crowd of 30 or 40,000, listening to Whitefield preach. And Whitefield is describing a sinner like a blind man who was walking towards the edge of a cliff. And his dog ran off, and he dropped his stick. And Whitefield brought out this sinner right out to the edge of the cliff. And then he took a step forward, and Chesterfield was so into the message, he went, "My God, he's gone!" He forgot it was a sermon. Okay? He is so wrapped up in it. Do you see that? He forgot he was listening to a preacher. He was actually in the illustration. He could see it. He was part of it. That is MTV preaching. Okay? Here's what Whitefield used to do. Every morning they had hangings, public hangings. People were getting hung for stealing a loaf of bread and all this stuff. So every morning the whole town crowded down to the public hanging place to cheer as the people were hung. I mean, it was a really, if you think times are bad in L.A., the gangs, you should have seen Whitefield's time. All the kids got front row places to watch, and they would watch, 5 or 6 people. Hey, it's getting hung today. Oh, they got old Joe. Oh, too bad, Joe. And they're all there. Here's what Whitefield did. The moment the hangings were finished, Whitefield would get up on the scaffold and preach from the scaffold. And the crowd wouldn't leave. They just stood there. He got up one time, he announced this text. "It is appointed unto man once to die," said George Whitefield. There's a shriek from the audience. "Ah!" See, this is silence. And then a couple of his workers pushed through the crowd, And they looked up and they said, "Cry aloud and spare not, Brother George. An immortal soul has just passed into eternity." Somebody had died right there. So Whitefield stopped and he said, "It is appointed unto man once to die." And there's another shriek, and a second person died. It was recorded that they paid very particular attention that day. Whitefield was not only loud, he was also incredibly, his voice was just an incredible voice. He was kind of a Richard Burton type voice, you know, a rich. Matter of fact, the top Shakespearean actor of his day, a guy called Robert Garrick, said he would give 1,000 gold sovereigns, a considerable sum of money, to be able to say the word "oh" like George Whitefield. Now, one of my all-time favorite preachers, and man certainly with content in his life, if you said a man who was a thinking person, had a lot of logic and facts, was Charles Finney. I now want to give you the number 2 major criticisms of Charles Finney's ministry by other ministers in his time. Would you like to hear what they were? Number 1 was, he does not look like a minister. He didn't dress in the requisite black suit with the collar and the gray wig and the whole thing. He wore a business type thing, and he doesn't even look like a minister, and the ministers were freaked out over that. Number 2, he doesn't preach. That was the second major criticism of Charles Finney. He does not preach. He just explains what other people preach and tells stories. When you read Finney, and I've got probably most of what Finney ever wrote, it's still in print somewhere, and you see these pictures of Finney, and they're sort of taken when he's nearly 80 years old, and he's got these burnt cork-looking eyes, and you think, oh, shoot, you know, who is this guy, man? But Finney was like Davy Crockett. That's really what he was. When he was saved, he was a young man, tall, blue-eyed, a frontiers man. He said in his biography he could outthrow, outrun, and outwrestle any man he met. And we're talking about a tall, Dallas Cowboys-looking guy who had an incredible sense of humor, was a musician and a singer, who played in the orchestra at church and joined the choir because he liked one of the girls in the choir, and he was studying to be a lawyer. So what you got then from that background, he was so dramatic when he preached that people were totally freaked out. They'd say he would describe what happens when a sinner passes into the presence of God. And he reads occasionally in these sermons, which were handwritten by people who were just there writing as fast as they could write, you can occasionally pick up in what sometimes took 2 hours compressed into the space of what can be read in maybe 30 minutes. But I have a book that was written by a guy who was in Finney's Bible College and who was there when they called him President Finney, and there was actual, literal conversation written down. Finney speaking, the reaction of the audience, not edited. Now here's something I want you to try. Have you ever had a really exciting conversation with somebody, you know, where you both talk, oh, no, this kind of thing? Here's what you should try and do. Tape it. Tape it. And then try and type up about 10 minutes of your conversation, exactly as it is. And it'll look weird to you. You ever seen a transcription of what you've said? It's really strange. It's not at all like things are in books. And most of it, you've got to put all these dots and sounds and things. Because here's what it really looks like. It's like that. Now, how do you put that in print? See? Here's the way we actually learn. We don't learn, first of all, information-wise. We learn by spirit, and then by character, and last by information. I'll give you the order of it. It goes like this. This is called a divine order and truth. And it's real simple. Number 1, this is the way God teaches, actually, and it's probably easily applicable to the way we should teach. Revelation is called God Speaks. So we're dealing here first with the spirit and the attitude of a person. How do we know that something is right or wrong? The first way in the Bible is by the spirit and the attitude of somebody. See? Number two, we could call this practical service. This is called you do it. God speaks, you do it. And this has to do with the fruit and the character of a person's life. By fruit, I mean the fruit of the Spirit. Love, joy, peace, gentleness, goodness, character things, see? The last one is illumination, which is called, he explains it. And then after this, you put maybe, because the explanation is optional. Okay? This is the way God speaks. He speaks, then you do it, then he might explain it. Okay? Here's the way we learn in the Western world. First you explain it. Then you decide whether you're going to do it, and finally you wind up spiritual. Finney said over 100 years ago, this was the divine order. If you reverse it, this is the kind of generation you get. Skeptical, cynical, rationalistic, fault-finding, nitpicking, and critical. Who either have no faith or hold very loosely to things that do not admit of clear, immediate explanation. That's the generation you live in. Okay? What I'm trying to point out here is that this thing is not first. It is not first in the way we learn. You know what I used to do? Turn off the sound on TV preachers and watch them. Try it sometime. It's real interesting. You get a guy going like this. You turn on the sound and he goes, God loves you. It's really funny, see? Body language. Look at it. Look at your body language. See? Some of you are cold. Others are, I don't believe that. Hey? Your body tells more about you. Your body expresses more about you. When you just forget yourself and just be yourself, that's where people pick up things. They pick up your spirit and your attitude. They pick up your character next. And finally, they hear the content of what you're saying. This has to do, this last one, with doctrine and with content of our thing. What I'm trying to show you is that even in the way we learn things, the biblical way is more like this, and then moves to that. What is this book but a bunch of stories linked together with teaching things? It opens up with the story of creation, the story of the fall, and so on. Picks up with the story of Abraham, goes all the way through, and stuck in between you've got stuff like genealogies and some psalms and some songs and some... See that? That's what this is. The whole book is like that. Therefore, when we're aiming here at getting an audience, the thing we've got to really work on are these two things. First, kids are going to decide, do I want to listen from your spirit and from your attitude? That will be communicated immediately to them the moment you get up. Before you've said a word, before you've done anything, they will pick up an attitude. See that? You get up and think like this. We're up and people you would. I'm going to say something to you today. And they go, oh, shoot, you know. They'll look for this. What is our big problem today? Our big problem is that the secular world has taken aim at this area here. The secular world doesn't care what we say. What its aim and its attack on the Christian church has been on these two things. What it says is this. Number one, you guys are a bunch of bigoted, prejudiced, ignorant nerds. Archie Bunker, okay? Who is the number one most effective evangelist on television today? Who? Billy Graham. No. He's very effective. He's spoken to more people than anybody else in history. No. Not Jimmy. No. No. Not Richard Roberts. No. Who? Yeah, very close. Bill Cosby. Norman Lear. It's probably affected more people. Who's Norman Lear? Pee Wee Herman. He's an effective evangelist. Do you understand? I didn't say Christian evangelist. I just said evangelist. What we're talking about, the ability to affect people with a message.